EOS Go presents EOS Radio, your first source for everything about the new blockchain Internet of Value. You'll hear from key contributors to EOS, including interviews with block.one, dApp development teams, and block producers. You'll get community updates and answers to common questions, meetup information, opportunities to get involved in EOS, and much more. We're live every Monday at 6 p.m. EST, and now it's time for your hosts, Kev and Blue Jays, in 3, 2, 1.
Hey guys, welcome to the April 9th, episode 7 of EOS Radio. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you guys had a nice weekend, and we're ready to kick it off with the In the Know Mondays. Hey Kevin, how you doing today?
Blue Jays, hello. Hello. I almost sound like that BitConnect guy right now. What's up? Sorry. I mean,
we're not going to sell BitConnect today, are we?
That's not on the, I don't think it's on the show notes. No.
Okay. I didn't get that memo, so.
Yeah. This is episode 7, as you said. We have Chintai. We have Erik Hoel, who was a fan favorite when he came on before. And then also we have EOS New York coming on. A lot of folks are excited about them. And, of course, Thomas Cox.
All right.
Well,
Big
what's new with you, Blue Jays? What's been going on this week?
I had a big weekend. Some stuff going on at my church, and also just it having all this Easter stuff going on. So I'm good to have that portion of it over, and I'm ready to get it kicked off and get ready for spring and see the nice weather coming out soon. Well, I'm in Florida, so the hotter weather. For other people, I feel your pain. So I feel that spring is coming out for you. How about you, Kev? How was your weekend?
Good, man. It was a quieter weekend. I tried to stay off Telegram a little bit. Sometimes you just need to go out into nature and hike around and think about what's coming up with EOS, and then you come back and you're just like, wow, I cannot wait. I missed Telegram. I missed all my buddies on Telegram. So we've had some big news this week. Obviously, Hong Kong and Dawn 3.0 was great. I mean, that Medium post by Dan just had me all fired up. And, of course, that meetup was incredible. I mean, that rebrand, we'll talk about all that later, of course,
yep.
And all the new news as well about the Novogratz. That's breaking news about him and Goldman Sachs. We'll bring that up later on as well, and Soros and everything else. So, we have Chintai coming on first. I believe they're coming up shortly. Chintai, a lot of you guys know about it. It's a community project, and they are building the first token rental leasing dApp for EOS, which will be amazing because anybody can rent out their tokens to developers to earn some extra EOS. Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, this is the promise that I think people had. Is we're going to get to lease out this token, and it's digital real estate. So this is kind of like the mechanism of how we go about doing this, and it's very complicated. There has to be market making and all sorts of cool algorithms on the background end to make it happen. So I'd love to hear about it from them.
Definitely, yeah. It sounds like it. So we'll be learning a lot today because it is a fairly complicated mechanism. The way they're providing liquidity and everything else, we'll hear more about that. Also, the way they're drawing in everybody from the community to help out for the project. If you look at their website, it's beautiful. They just released it. It's linked in our promotional post that we put out earlier today. So if you'd like to see more on their website, you can always pull that up, and also we'll share it in the chat so everybody can take a look. And I believe they're coming up shortly. So we're going to have David Packham. He is based in London or thereabouts. And here he comes. That's the man himself, David Packham. There he is. And we also have David Callan coming in from New York as well. Need to get some confirmation as it is. Hey, David.
Hi, how are you?
Doing very well. It's good to finally meet you.
Yeah, I'm equally intrigued as to whether it's Callan or Callan as well. So we'll soon find out.
Perfect. Well, we're about to learn a whole bunch of new things around here.
Hi, David.
Hi, how are you, Blue Jays?
Doing well today.
How does the sound come across? Is it okay? I just got a new mic to try and not sound so tin can. So.
You sound great.
You sound good. You're a little quiet. Maybe that's just you.
Could be me. Let's try this. Is that better?
A little better. Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Just go ahead and shout. You love Chintai, so you might as well just...
Chintai. Well, maybe he is having a few difficulties. We can kick off. I know you guys have got a schedule you're keeping to, so by all means.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, we always do the who, what, where, why, when from everybody, and so basically we'd like to know more about you first, your background, and then how you got involved in EOS, and then Chintai, of course.
Yeah. So my background, I mean, I'm getting old now, so I've just hit 40 actually, and I have about a 20-year career in asset management and a variety of related IT development systems backgrounds. So I came from an IT background, moved into more of asset management, and then watched the whole financial system collapse, and that kind of changed my view on what I wanted to get out of doing with my life. So that's how I first got into the whole blockchain space. I was looking into different technologies that could actually decentralize, and I could see that centralization for me was a bit of a problem. And that's then what led down, as we all know, the EOS rabbit hole, right? Which is once you go down it, you rarely come back.
Yeah, that's about sums it up there. I know. There's Mr. Callan or Kalen.
Kalen, can you guys hear me all right?
Kalen, yeah, you sound great.
Great.
Awesome. Sorry, I was trying to get the Zoom up and running.
Yeah, and clearly, Mr. Kalen, you must be from what, Greenland? I can't tell from the flag in the back.
Yeah, Greenland. That's the flag right there, so we're all good.
Oh, beautiful. Wow. Yeah, so we just heard from Mr. Packham about his background and how he got involved in EOS and Chintai. And how about you?
So I got an academic background in economics and then professionally in cybersecurity. Chintai, so actually started out, I think I reached out to Kevin at EOS New York because I had been part of the meetups trying to see if he had any ideas on how to kind of get a team going around this. Just suggested Telegram, which I think probably everyone who's watching this is pretty familiar with at this point. But just threw out the idea in one of the dev chats and connected with David. I think Nathan actually was the one who connected me with David, Nathan James. And then we just went offline, kind of started discussing. We had pretty much the same idea. I think we both weren't sure. I mean, at least I wasn't at first, whether block.one would be kind of doing this on their own or where anyone else might have been. But it seemed like the perfect timing for us to kind of get in touch and start moving on it. So we got together, him and Charles and I, and started moving from there. And obviously here we are now. So things are going well so far.
I actually got the authoritative answer from block.one, which is I asked Sandwich. Sandwich told me, and it must be true, right?
Mm.
So.
Yeah.
But that is essentially right. I mean, I'll give you our perspective because obviously Charles and I, we're part of EOS 42, and so being a block producer candidate, we all have different perspectives, and I think we're seeing that and actually a lot of open discussion about what the role of a block producer is. And for us, we really wanted to start trying to create and support apps for the community. And the obvious one that was out there for me with my background was leasing, because I understand all orders and how they're actually managed. So for me, the idea of doing that and actually making it feeless was the big driver behind Chintai, because I could see a way that we could instantly, with other community-focused BPs, actually fund this whole platform and keep it completely free for everybody. And understanding the economics of EOS, you pretty quickly realize that leasing is going to be a big part in the future, not so much maybe on launch itself, of how all the economics is going to work.
So if you're keeping it feeless, then that means that the maintenance costs will go back to EOS 42?
Yeah, well, it's not just that. I mean, if anybody cares to take a look at the our website that has gone live, I mean, we've already got backing from EOS New York, EOS Detroit, EOSphere, EOS SoCal, EOS Tribe, and EOS DAC. So yep. It's by no means just one BP. This is a project far bigger, and if you take a look at the core dev team, I mean, it's made up of just individuals from across the community, which is what I find so inspiring about it. Actually, we got out there with a white paper, and people have come together from across a huge, diverse range of backgrounds, people, and they're giving up their free time as we start to go from initial designs right through into the coding stage, which we kicked off. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, so as I mentioned before, Telegram, I just think it's like such a powerful tool now, the things we can kind of do. Obviously, I don't have a part with EOS 42, but big part of the Chintai team, and we've kind of put the team together primarily through the use of Telegram and others. So it's been huge for us to kind of get this going, getting the wide community involved with this. And that's been the whole goal from the very beginning of this thing.
It's been fairly impressive the way you guys have rallied the community behind this project. And can you talk more about what Chintai is looking like, how the project works, and also what's being worked on right now?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll take the initial question, David, and then you can jump in whenever you want.
Sure.
In terms of its early structure, the plan is always that this gets fully handed over to be community owned and maintained going forward. So we're already looking at, for example, when this is handed over post launch, there'll be some sort of governance process whereby worker proposals end up being the driver for future functionality. But right now, it's a very kind of traditional project team. It's a group of individuals that have come together. It has its advantages in that although it's not as decentralized as maybe the way that we sometimes would look at some of these teams could work, it's very dynamic. We are fast working. We're able to fast interact with each other and make decisions and action off them. So we've got to a point where a technical design doc's being put together. Some of the initial coding is already started. Steve from EOS Dallas has just been doing a phenomenal job with the user interface side as well for us. So it's been really quite great just for us to see the different aspects of the design already taking place and starting to actually fill out here. But really, we are quite focused on the fact that our intention is to try and get a launch version as ready as soon as possible for the blockchain launch itself. So it'll have cut down functionality initially, and then we can start to expand out some of the more advanced leasing functionality that's outlined in the white paper later. So,
what as a token holder? As a token holder, what am I looking for in a leasing platform? And you obviously, David P, you know it a lot better with your background. So, I mean, can you explain to me, for somebody who's not really that advanced in terms of all the leasing options out there, but what would I need, a regular person, to be able to do what I want?
So, I mean, apart from obviously holding EOS tokens yourself in a wallet, at that point, it's just going to be a case of registering with Chintai itself. And in theory, from that point onwards, you can make your tokens available for leasing. And it will be then for the DApp producers on the other side to actually look at that and say, yes, we want to start picking up tokens rather than acquiring more and more of our own. And what's going to happen is as the token price increases, that opportunity cost for them of holding these tokens goes up and up and up. And the business models for a lot of these guys is going to be to do a variety of different things, but it's not going to be sit there holding, in theory, further down the line, if the token price rises to a sort of level, it could be millions of dollars of tokens they'd have to hold just to run their app, or they can lease them vastly more cheaply. And so the way it's really going to look for the average user is that they're going to be able to fairly flexibly pick the leasing term, so how long they actually want to lease out for. There will be a market rate that's continually being decided by supply and demand dynamics within the application itself. I won't go into the kind of specifics of how the more sophisticated pricing could work, but in effect, what you're going to see, therefore, at the end of each cycle is that you're going to be getting hard-earned EOS tokens in a form of payment back for your leasing them out. And okay, all you end up having to do is, in effect, leave them staked and locked for the period you agree. So it's going to be a win for everybody because it gives it gives DApp producers the ability to actually run their applications more cheaply. And it gives you, the token holder, the ability to actually realize some form of income from just holding. So it's pretty cool.
It sounds really cool. When would a DApp owner require a temporary need of tokens?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example, actually. I mean, say you guys went fully decentralized as a platform further down the line with EOS Radio, and it was a decentralized app on EOS. You might decide to yourselves, right, we want to buy, we're going to have a huge marketing campaign for something big, and we want to buy a load of CPU or bandwidth, and we need to guarantee we can lease out X amount, say over a 1 week window. You could just go into Chintai, book that space out, lease the tokens in advance. Further down the line, this is what would be possible, and it would be able to buy you that bandwidth, so you had no worries about the fact that we don't have enough. So those are the sorts of examples. But I mean, it could be any kind of business. Anything doing a marketing campaign would require that kind of thing. Anything that might require more intensive use. I mean, let's give you an example too. Another would be, say you launch a game on EOS and it suddenly goes absolutely viral. You could look ahead and go, this has gone crazy. Why don't we just sneak into the market now, book out and lease a load of forward bandwidth capacity here, so we're locked in and guaranteed, and we don't have any impact on that.
Or some tax preparation software or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's another good one.
Yeah. Just to echo David on that, there's going to be dApps of all different sizes, obviously. So right away, you may not have the capital or want to go out and buy everything, like he said. You may suddenly come up with something, the price is too high, you're just starting an idea, boom, you have the ability to go out and you have access to that liquid pool. I think that's what we've been thinking about from the beginning, or at least personally I have, where they're going to be all different teams kind of coming together here, and they're all going to want access to the same type of things. Not to mention, though, even if you have a huge dApp team, a lot of liquid capital, as David mentioned, the opportunity cost is going to be much better for you to be able to lease them than to have to go out and buy a ton of tokens anyway. So it's going to be useful for every single team out there, anyone who's looking to get into it. We're going to have flexible lease options for whatever the case may be. So, I mean, I'm excited to see how this is all going to come together. I think we all are when we launch this thing in June.
And we should get into the community project aspect of this. I mean, this is probably the first community project, I believe, of any on EOS, where literally you guys have sort of wrangled a group of people together just who would like to have a token rental dApp, and you guys have led the charge, and now it's in full process here. So can you tell us more about how that's worked out, how you guys got the community involved, and what the next steps are?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite inspiring, the fact that you can pull together people and form a team out of almost nothing, right? Which is certainly, and I think, this is by far just an indication of things to come. There are lots of other groups that are starting to form projects and pull them out, but this is certainly was unusual in the sense that it was trying to get people to give up their time for absolutely no financial compensation whatsoever, right? Which is always a tough one. Hey, why don't you give us all your expertise and time for no benefit in terms of financial? And that shows, though, that anything is possible with a community like this. But yeah, it was an interesting one, right? The white paper was really well received, and I thought to myself, oh man, I'm going to be having to just fight off the applicants to come and get involved in this cool project. And actually, it was a kind of case of maybe not. A lot of people are really keen to join the channel and talk about this stuff, but there aren't so many who are actually, really keen to just get involved and join the team. So it took about 3 or 4 weeks before we got to the point of what I would say we had a core team. And that was probably as well because it took a while for the wider community to become fully aware of what this thing was. A lot of people had heard of Chintai. They had no real idea necessarily of what it was. And even if they did, their first reaction is, it's some sort of BP project that's going to be, there to make them money. So when people found out, no, actually, this is going to be a feeless, community-owned project, and it's for everyone, that's when the attitude changed, and everybody was suddenly keen to go, actually, I'm going to give up my time. Steve was a great example, and suddenly we've got all that benefit from him on the design and UX side as well. So that's it's certainly for me been quite inspiring. I've come from quite centralized companies where I've watched quite inefficient development, and it's always been focused around having to follow due processes all the way. So now seeing something here where it's just really just, pow, 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 we're going to get things done and we're going to get this done. And then later on, we can always redo things. It's really cool. It's very entrepreneurial inside the team, which I love to see.
That's amazing. And actually, speaking of community engagement, we have Don Sol 1 here in the chat just said there's a small typo on the webpage. It says devleopers instead of developers. There you go. Community benefit right there. So,
right there. This is where I'm going to slap Charles. Excellent. Okay, thank you.
And David K., so let's talk about the economics a little bit. I mean, I know you have an economics background. Can you dive in a little bit to how the token will work, the crypto economics behind the liquidity, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I don't know how deep we want to get into the actual token mechanisms right now. I think we're kind of going through exactly how we want to work that out and deliver it. I mean, if you look in the white paper, the initial idea was that we have these cycles, which again, we're still deciding on, I think, the length of the cycles that will make this kind of the most viable option. That will, for every token or for every EOS token that you lease out, then a Chintai token is then given per whatever cycle, if it's a week, a day, again, not 100% worked out yet, given to the DApp team, the user. So again, we get kind of confused here with lessor and lessee, confusing terms, which we had used in the white paper, I think. So we've been going back to like the DApp team and then a staker, but won't get into all that. Anyway, the Chintai token is created for the user, and then the DApp team is then buys that back at the end of the cycle after the agreed upon pricing mechanism occurs. But again, there's a lot of things still to be worked on with the leasing engine. I think for our initial launch, we'll have some more default options, and it will be manually done, and we'll kind of get into further to those advanced leasing options later. We don't want to promise anything here, as there's obviously some time and subject to change.
I think that's right. It's going to be more, if anybody who's familiar with Steam, it's going to be, in terms of its early interface, more akin to something like Minnow Booster. So it will be a self-matching service whereby you say, there's someone offering their tokens at that rate. Click, I'm going to fill that order and I'm going to lease them at that rate. It gets more sophisticated when you add the token in, but it's an internal token. Nobody get excited. We're not airdropping on anyone. I'm really sorry. Although we'd get more followers if we did that, right?
All you need to do is say airdrop, yeah.
Exactly. We are airdropping Chintai tokens, and you can't sell them anywhere. So, because what actually happens? I mean, this was Mr. James's big insight into this, was making it a pure utility token for pricing, and they get burned at the end of every cycle. The Chintai tokens on the buyback side. So it's a fascinating utilization of tokens in a way that they're meant to be being utilized rather than just as currency, right? And so we certainly want to explore this further, because it is actually an incredibly clever way of finding a price determination point, which doesn't require any kind of tie back to fiat in any way. So exactly as David said, we're working through the logistics of that, but mindful of the fact that that's not going to be available on launch. With Dawn 3 only just now coming out, that's the sort of functionality that we're only just going to be able to even start contemplating. So it's to follow, and it was always on the roadmap to follow later on. So.
I'm almost envisioning this. Your DApp gets launched, Chintai gets launched, and everyone puts their tokens there. And all of a sudden, you have like 1 cent to basically your opportunity cost to rent is going to be so much cheaper, and therefore a whole bunch of dApps are going to come on.
Well, they might do, or they might not. You see, it depends, doesn't it? Because the way they're going to look at it, any dApp that was halfway savvy will probably go, "Wow, these tokens are so cheap right now. Do I think they're going to go up?" Yeah, if I was a dApp owner right now, I would go, well, you know what? Yeah, I can see us maybe selling these off later on, but you probably would be buying at these kind of prices. It's where they get to 20, 30, 40 each that you'd be looking and going, all right, we need how many? Wow, that's a lot of money to be suddenly
Are you talking about EOS or
Chintai?
EOS. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's early on. I think you're right, though. I mean, there's probably going to be a relatively high supply early on and a relatively low demand for leasing, and then that will gradually switch around, and that is going to obviously have a direct impact on the leasing price. But it links into other things too, which is that it's partly a responsibility of the BPs themselves to actually increase and expand out the bandwidth capacity on the network too, to ensure that leasing never becomes too expensive either. So and the token price too has a direct impact on affordability for people leasing. So you could put a dApp owner out of business in theory if there's a massive spike upwards in the EOS token price and they're leasing on current pricing. So they're probably going to want to lock in, over say a 1 year period and give themselves that stability.
It's probably like the renting versus leasing your home concept where if you're going to stay in one location for over 5 years, you might as well own it, right?
Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, on the other hand, a lot of rich people, they like to take out loans against their house because it's a cheap way to do it. So there's lots of ways to look at these things. You're right.
Again, yeah, opportunity cost of the money. You don't have to pay it all up front. You can be doing something else with what you could have spent initially. So we'll see what happens, I guess, when those big apps come out and see what they decide to do.
Sure. Yeah, and we know by now that obviously as a DPoS chain, people are used to being paid through voting for block producers, but that will not be the case with EOS, obviously. So it looks like Chintai will be one of the few ways that we know of right now where people can make extra EOS from their EOS, correct? So this is certainly an exciting, no airdrop, but this is an exciting project nonetheless, because long-term the benefits will be huge. How can people look at getting involved in Chintai? What are the next steps?
Well, I think the big one of all will be join the Telegram channel, Chintai at Chintai EOS, because if you are interested in getting involved on a project management capacity analysis, particularly coders, or just to talk anybody who's got some thoughts on the long-term governance side of this as well, we're looking for people. So if they would like to get involved, stick your hand up, and we'd be delighted to talk to you guys.
Yep, contacts listed on the website too, which is all up and running now, so everyone can take a look over there. We got the white paper on there, as well as the teams, the sponsors, everything. So there's a few different resources out there to get in touch with us now.
Yeah, website looks great. We posted it earlier in the chat, so if you are in there, go ahead and scroll up a little bit. You'll see Chintai-EOS.com, I believe it is.
Yep.
And also
.io. That giant spelling error you're talking about now, it's just upsetting.
.io, everybody, the cool websites are .io, as we all know by now.
Yeah, of course.
The question we love to ask everybody too, we make sure we ask you guys, where do you guys see EOS going, long term, and what are your wildest dreams and visions for EOS, and why?
I'll tell you what, the thing that I don't fully yet understand, and I'm going to be perfectly honest about it, is exactly how all this future world of multiple chains interacting is fully going to... I don't understand how that's all going to work yet. So for me, I must admit, I can see the main chain in it, how it's going to evolve, but yet I don't fully understand how it's all going to interact. You know what I mean? And that's my big one. I'm watching with interest, but beyond the evolution of the main chain itself, it's hard to tell. But if you look at all of the rival Gen 3 blockchains, I mean, I just don't see any of them having a hope right now at keeping up with this. So it's going to be a really interesting 6 months, I think, when some of the big commercial projects launch. I'm talking and giving some advice to a decentralized bank that's launching on EOS, right? So there's some exciting stuff out there, all under the surface right now that people don't know about. And it's big projects. And when that kicks in, I think it's going to be we're going to see the community probably triple, quadruple in size probably in the first 6 months from where it is now. And it's going to be, very interesting.
Yeah, for me, it's all about the projects, I think. I think cryptocurrency and blockchain obviously has kind of become a little bit mainstream over the past year, mainly because of the ICOs and all the different cryptos, investors and speculation. But people have also been talking about, hey, look, here's what blockchain can possibly do, but there hasn't been a chain out there that you've been able to kind of release these apps on, and there hasn't been any proof of concept really out there for all these different ideas. And so hopefully Chintai can be part of this and enable those apps to go out and get built, and EOS will be what I think we're all hoping it will be. So I'm, again, excited to see what will happen here. Yeah,
and you guys are certainly setting the model for what a community project should look like. And of course, the app itself will be very useful in the long run as well.
So, David P., you mentioned the fact that you don't understand too much about multiple chains coming out, but Chintai looks like one of those projects that would possibly be able to fill a need on those multiple chains.
Oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, in theory, that's exactly what will happen, is that side chains and other chains they'll be utilizing it as well for leasing. So I guess where I say I don't understand is I don't yet fully understand the complex interplay of dynamics and economics that's going to end up occurring.
I see what you mean, under the covers, yeah.
it's kind of going to be, it's hard, I think, for any of us to fully see it. It'll be like probably, I guess, us sitting there in 1994 and be able to envisage how, you know, the big internet giants of the future would end up turning out. And it might well be a bit like that. We're sitting there with this big black space in front of us and not really sure yet how it's all going to play out.
We're looking at that @ symbol and we're just scratching our heads. We're like, what is this thing?
Got it. Yeah.
Well, cool. It's been, thank you guys for talking more about Chintai. You cleared up a lot. And of course, as you mentioned, go on the website. It looks phenomenal. I mean, everybody loves the website. So check out the team, read the white paper. It was illuminating for me as well. And I'm sure a lot of folks will find the same. Yeah, it's good to meet you guys. Of course, we'll see you around. You and I have talked about before, David P., about the good old days of Telegram. Someday we'll look back on these and we'll see like, oh, those, small community still trying to build up. And these are the foundational days of the next web, as we believe. So
they are, because right now everybody, it pretty much is super positive. Anybody who comes from anywhere else in crypto right now, they talk about the EOS community and how positive it is and how willing people are to give time up and explain things. And long may that last, right? That we keep that culture, that people, as they come in, they pick that up too and realize that's how it's done amongst all of us, because it's going to be for our benefit if we can keep it that way. It's good.
Yeah. Well, here's to EOS, and thank you guys. We will be catching up with you eventually. And thank you, David K., as well. Had fun in Greenland there.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. It was nice meeting you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Blue Jays. Thanks, Kev. Cheers. Bye.
Wow, that was great. Well, Chintai is one of the most interesting projects that I know of. What did you learn, Blue Jays? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for the simple fact, people want to know how they're gonna make money, right? So
everybody wants
when Lambo.
I mean, money, that's never a popular topic, So.
But yeah, it is amazing to see how the token is such a utility token. It's like real estate. And speaking of real estate,
there he is, Erik Hoel. Welcome, sir.
Sorry, did I jump in?
That's fine.
We were just talking about Chintai. We just had the guys on the show that.
Yeah, I was watching. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. Chintai sounds like a great project, but you would come on. This is Erik Hoel. Let's introduce you first. You've been on episode 3, a few episodes back, and you're based in New York City. Can you describe your background briefly?
Yeah, sure. I'm a scientist and a writer, but I'm also involved in the EOS community here in New York, and I'm particularly excited because there's been just such a big upswelling of community within New York itself, and I think that, despite the bit license. So my guess is that if you can have a lot of enthusiasm in like the most stringently regulated, square blocks on Earth, there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm everywhere.
I think you about summed it up. Sounds good to me. And we have a few topics to dive into. We want to talk about Vitalik and Dan and their discussion over the blogs. Go ahead and give us a little background. Yeah.
Well, kind of a recent, really interesting thing that happened is that Vitalik, who's one of the lead devs of Ethereum, has been issuing kind of a string of, well, one might uncharitably call them attacks. I think he's very intellectually honest in general and a very good person, so I wouldn't say that they're attacks, but they're basically, he's very skeptical of this idea of the consensus mechanism and the governance project of EOS, and I think that it's very interesting because his main concern is something that's been a big kind of thing in the community, which is this notion of kickbacks and whether delegates should give kickbacks for votes and so on. And I think if you read his article, it kind of spends about 2 paragraphs saying, for sure, kickbacks are going to happen. People will get bribed for their votes because in EOS, you hold 1 token, you get 1 vote. And that this is an inherently corruptible system. And then he goes on for like 2 more pages to say why corruption is very bad and you don't want it in blockchains, which I don't think anyone could possibly disagree with. But the problem is, of course, that actually proving that any like representative token holder system will move inherently towards corruption is impossible. And I think that it's very bad that we have people who are purely programmers or generally coming at it from a very purely programming perspective or engineering perspective, trying to say, well, I can prove that a community will kind of operate in a certain way. And one like counterexample is there are all sorts of very successful, honest republics and commonwealths. And I think EOS is kind of aiming at being a republic and a commonwealth where there's governing representatives, and it's kind of like representational government, where you have one token, one vote, you elect these block producers, and now we learn these legal arbiters, and they will be the people kind of making these decisions, but they can be easily and fluidly voted out. And it's very funny to me that suddenly this concept that everyone recognizes as very good in real life, which is one token, one vote in a representational democracy, is like, oh, this is inevitably going to lead to horrific corruption, and it can't possibly make any sense in terms of working on a blockchain or something like that. So it's very much people stuck in these old models and ways of doing things based off of what has worked. And I don't think that they're willing to take a new chance and try something a little bit more complex, and I think personally a little bit more interesting.
What has worked in that space, in the Ethereum space there, that we can take some lessons from?
Well, for one thing, it's very clear that most of these chains, if you compare, for example, Bitcoin to Ethereum governance, Bitcoin is basically like controlled anarchy, right? It's completely, every man for himself in Bitcoin land. And the protocol is set up to pretty much work that way. But for example, back in December, there was a reason transaction fees were $20 to $40. And that's because people couldn't settle on how to evolve the code, because everything needs to be evolved. Nothing is perfect when it first comes out of the gate, and everything runs into problems. So what we currently have in what Vitalik considers like the correct, makes so much sense form of governance is basically a naturally emerged form of governance that relies on kind of a power struggle, or at least power checking between two entities, the miners and the devs, right? And the problem is that this is a very it's a very combative political process. It's like there's two political parties in these systems. They're always at war. Their interests are almost never aligned. And in fact, they're almost purposely not aligned. Versus, I think, with EOS, if you look at some of the stuff that Ian Gregg, who's designing some of this governance processes, the governance is going to be a lot more distributed. It's going to have more checks and balances. For example, now we're hearing more about these arbiters who are going to exist on chain to kind of settle disputes and transactions. Sorry, not settle transactions, but like settle disputes over transactions or over bugs, or even over whether or not a block producer or accounts did something wrong. And then if that's the case, now you have the arbiters, and they're going to be in some check and balance relationship to block producers. And then you have the voters voting for these various things. So you're getting something that looks a lot more like actual checks and balances and how they work in a real government. And we know that that works because it's literally what our entire society is based on. And yet, we think, oh, well, no, what's better is eternal warfare between miners and devs. Like this is going to be the superior form of blockchain governance. And I think it's just, we're familiar with that. And that's the thing that Ethereum has, and it's kind of worked so far. So, if it's not broke, in their opinion, why fix it? But EOS has the chance to innovate.
It's kind of like a form of collaborative competition in a way, right? If you were to compare the model of governance that you're seeing emerge, we've talked about the three heads of power that Ian has also mentioned in governance chat. And if you were to compare that to the United States, for example, to local governments even, it's pretty similar, isn't it, in some ways?
Sure. And at a, federal level, I think also, first of all, this notion of like corruption and corruption being bad, it's like, well, everything in the world is corrupt to some particular degree. Like Ethereum still mines empty blocks because miners sneak them in, right? That's kind of like a form of corruption, but obviously the Ethereum chain still works relatively well. So in that sense, there's always going to be some level of like graft, but you can just compare this very easily to the difference between a working representational government and a non-functional one, right? And a lot of times I think people easily conflate the two and say, well, anytime there's governance and there's people involved, there's going to be some form of corruption. And it's like, yeah, but we all know the difference between like a small, well-run township in Massachusetts, which is some commonwealth, and like the corruption of Venezuela or something, like the most corrupt government in the world. And you just walk down the street and you'll know the difference between those two things. And so, like the bar that EOS needs to clear is not nothing is ever wrong. The bar it needs to clear is, do we have a livable governance? And then what you sacrifice for that, what you gain in involving humans is that now you're protected from black swans, which is what businesses really need to be protected from in order to move their stuff on chain, because you don't know if a bug's going to take out your $200 million in your multi-sig wallet, like what happened with Parity, right? Which is that suddenly, we don't have a business anymore because all the money we had is just gone. That's happened on Ethereum several times now. So it's worth adopting a real governance, working with real people, having the minor, chance of corruption to inoculate yourself from any sort of black swan, such that as long as the government process is reasonably good, then you can get your money back if something goes wrong. You can use the system if something goes wrong. You can build your business with some expectation that if things go wrong, you're not completely screwed.
How do we protect ourselves from that minor corruption that you just mentioned?
Yeah, it's a good question. And this is where I think people have such problems, because it's not really a mathematical answer. Like it has nothing to do with exactly what you can do is try to set the system up in such a way that you hope that 2/3 of the block producers aren't going to become immensely corrupt. You hope that people don't start buying votes. You hope that, like all these things don't happen. And the way you do that is you just have a very strong community, I think, just like any good government. Like what makes good government, right? And why isn't it the case that in America you don't get paid when you walk into a voting booth? Now we can have kind of like a linguistic debate about, do Americans ever get kickbacks for their vote? And some Republicans and libertarians might say certain aspects of welfare are like kickbacks in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
But I think even if one kind of goes down that road, it's a very like indirect form. Like no one in most well-functioning governments of the world get paid money to walk into a voting booth, and it's generally because they've organized themselves around a constitution or around a legal system, and EOS is going to have both of those. And when you formalize the process, when you formalize all this stuff in like really direct ways, we're not just saying everyone has to be nice to one another, right? It's like, no, there's going to be a literal constitution. Everyone's going to know when you violate it, and it's going to function exactly the same as when you violate the Constitution here, which is that you violate the Constitution in America, people will go, like, how dare you? You can't do that, right? Even though it's just a piece of paper, right? So I think that's how it's going to avoid that corruption, is that you're just going to build a good community using a constitution and a legal system. Yeah.
Thomas Cox mentioned on a previous show about whistleblowers in this sort of mechanism to outline or to highlight corruption. That, as well as the arbitration process. I think that's what you're talking about, these mechanisms that are in place to prevent these things.
Right. I mean, I think what will prevent corruption fundamentally is some form of checks and balances. This is what always prevents corruption in any sort of government, is some form of checks and balances. And in EOS, you have probably something like the legal system, like this judicial branch that's going to sit on EOS. You're going to have like the Constitution itself as kind of a founding document, and as maybe one could argue part of the judicial system. You're going to have the representatives who do the voting and the action and kind of manage things. They're going to be like the elected officials, which are the delegates, right? They're going to interface with the judges, but they're not going to be the same people or anything. And then you also have the voters. So, that structure works very well. Like the one thing we don't have there is an executive branch. But we actually do kind of have an executive branch, because it's generally probably going to be the block.one team with a $1 billion war chest. So economically, they're essentially functioning as the executive branch, as it currently stands now. So, but if they did things wrong enough, people have one token, one vote. In theory, they can be checked as well, right? So, so I think that it's going to come down to just having this well thought out system. And what people haven't realized yet is that this is actually going to work in a way better way than just having, if there's a problem, we hard fork. If there's a disagreement, we hard fork.
Yeah.
If I can get everyone to agree and the devs and the miners to agree, we might do something.
Right. And also the other concept as mentioned before, if you put your private key on a table and someone else grabs it, that doesn't mean it's yours, right? So we can enforce things like that as well.
Yes. And that's a big reason why people will actually keep money on the chain. So, if you want to talk about store of value, well, one aspect of store of value is that you're not at risk of losing all your value very, very quickly and easily, right? So I think Bitcoin will eventually overcome this because the technology will get so good in terms of the multi-sig wallets and that sort of technology that if your entry into the chain is secure enough, you might eventually be able to overcome it. But EOS will overcome it much, much faster in that you can just go to petition, especially if you're like a big DApp. If you're the Facebook of EOS, right? You're not worried about having your business on EOS because you're a big voice in the community. Anything goes wrong, you're going to be able to talk to block producers, etc. People need that. Like, they fundamentally need that.
This is why I like talking to you, Eric, because you just get more, as you dive into a point, you get more and more fired up, and I love it. It's just, I get really into it too. I'm like, yeah. Tell me.
Do we have a brief moment to talk about the inter-chain communication that was brought up earlier?
Yeah, I was about to bring it up too. You're talking about the one token to rule them all, and we don't really know a whole lot about it yet, but the inter-blockchain communication, and Dan and Brendan both were talking about one token ruling those chains. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, this is part of a pattern of the block.one team, which is that, like, I'm watching them develop this, and then I come up with some objection about why, this is going to be like a problem, right? And the very first one was, what's going to make there be a main chain that respects the token distribution, right? And then they don't say. And then eventually they announce, there's $1 billion war chest, and we're only going to be developing on the main chain, and the $1 billion war chest is only for the main chain. So it's like, okay, so sign me on to the main chain. Like, there's obviously going to be a main chain because there's so much economic gravity, right? So they had kind of like already thought that, but they hadn't told us, right? So, one of the big concerns has been that if EOS taps out at a certain upper limit of transactions per second or a certain amount of storage, then people will just start spinning up like other EOS chains because it doesn't cost too much, at least in theory, to spin up a new chain, right? And so you can imagine this kind of creates this diminishing return value where it's like, well, if my value of my EOS token that I hold is my rights in terms of voting and my access to property, that is in terms of the transactions and the storage on the blockchain, if you can just create new blockchains like ad infinitum, then what is the actual value of my token, right? And in fact, if we're going to need to create new blockchains to handle the scales of which people are kind of developing for, then it's worth even less, right? It's like I have a deed to Manhattan real estate, but you can press a button and you get another Manhattan, right? And it's like, okay, so your Manhattan real estate is worth nothing, actually. But it turns out, I think that this has been known all along. And the idea is now that there's this old notion of like side chains or peg chains, and there's something kind of similar going on. But what's going to happen is that the governance in the form of the voters, who are the token holders, and then also the way that what those tokens represent, which are the transactions and storage, those will all be the same distribution of people. And then when you spin up like a new EOS chain, what will happen is that all the same rights and resources will now apply to that chain, and therefore you can just kind of scale indefinitely. And it's kind of like, I can make a new Manhattan, but everyone who has the deed to the buildings there now has the deed to the buildings on the new mirror Manhattan that I just like spun up, right? And that the political governance process doesn't change across the different real estates that I spin up, right? So everything is orthogonal. So I think that I've been waiting to hear something about this for like a while, and I think it's directly now confirmed from Brendan, and this is something that people missed in the announcement, which is that holding single EOS tokens will basically allow you to participate in the governance and resources of all the EOS chains that are spun off of the main chain.
Where did you think this need came from? Like, is this something that was needed in a prior DPoS chain?
I think that one reason is that eventually this is going to tap out at a certain amount. I mean, so the need to having multiple chains and the ability of the token to kind of govern over them, it's like a very easy and viable form of scaling, right? You just double what you've done, right? And then you have the same delegates or block producers work over the chain. They know what they're doing. They've already been elected and so on. So you captured the network effect. But in terms of the need, my guess is that each EOS chain is going to tap out maybe 100, at most like 100,000 transactions per second. You're going to need to spin up some more.
It's a resourcing thing.
Yeah, it's just that, if we want 1 million transactions per second, what you want is 1 million transactions per second, but you still own the same percentage of the bandwidth, and you still have the same voters, and you still have the same thing, right? So, it's just crazy to me that you have something like Ethereum, and what is Ether? Like, Ether is just a gas that you burn for the microtransactions on the network, and everyone goes crazy for this thing, and you just use it to do one thing. It has one utility, which is you just burn it, and you only need a tiny bit. You can burn it. You can buy it as you burn it. Like, you don't even need to hoard a bunch of it. You can just buy it as you burn it, right? And then EOS has, like, I don't know, at this point, like 5 different utilities, voting, like participating in the government's voting. You can lock it up for storage. You can lock it up for RAM. You can lock it up to rent. You can rent it itself. You can lock it up for transactions. You need it to do certain things on the network. And now it's going to be the same token is also going to have the same 5 utilities on like every other EOS chain that gets spun up probably, that if you need to scale. And it's just really funny to me that like the market hasn't figured out that the thing that you want is like the token that has all the utility. Like, you want it to have the most possible utilities. And we just got told that this one token is not just governing the utilities of this chain. It's also going to literally govern the utilities of future chains as well.
It's crazy.
Right?
Yeah, I think the word cryptocurrency is an insult to EOS in my mind.
Good point.
Maybe. I like the term cryptocurrency, but it's like crypto real estate or something. It's like very economically.
A whole new crypto state.
Possibly, eventually.
Yep.
Well, Erik, it was great having you on.
Yes, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we always enjoy talking to you. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, for sure. Very much enjoying the show.
Okay.
Thanks. We'll see you soon.
Bye, gentlemen.
Bye. Man, wow. Well, you know how much I like Erik. So whenever he comes on, it's just everybody's mind goes, whoa.
Yeah,
so.
he pumped me up there for sure. I need to take a break. Yeah. I need to take a drink of water.
Yeah. Might need to go hop in the sprinkler as well after that. Cool off.
Cool myself off.
Yeah. We have EOS New York coming up, guys. I know a lot of folks are very familiar with EOS New York. We have the entire team coming on. That's Kevin Rose, Rick Schlesinger, I believe I said his name right. And then we have Buddy Deck. William Deck is their tech guy, CTO, I guess you could call him. And then we also have Michael Haggerty is their newest addition to the team. He is developing their dApps as well. The whole team is coming on. It's going to be a crowded. We have never had 6 screens on at once, and here they come. That would be Michael Haggerty there. Hello, sir. And that's a beautiful shirt that you're wearing. I think we all have the same shirt on, I believe.
I got one too. Yeah. There we go.
Perfect. Beautiful. Yeah. Hey guys, there's Buddy. That's CTO I was just talking about. Yep. Hey, buddy.
How we doing, guys?
Good to see you. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, good evening.
And there's Rick. Hey guys. There's all 6.
Oh wow. I didn't even have to switch anything around. Great.
So wait, are we all wearing the same shirt? You guys, every single one of you?
Oh my God. Nice.
We're all one with EOS. Here we are. Well, so thank you guys for coming on. I mean, a lot of folks, very familiar with EOS New York. You guys have one of the most visible presences in the community. So thank you guys. And let's just dive right in here. I mean, the who, what, where, why, when. You guys know the format. Let's hear some more about EOS New York.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And it's so great to see everybody's face up here. And we've been longtime fans of the show. We are EOS New York, block producer candidate in North America. My name is Kevin Rose. I'm co-founder and head of community, and we'll go around the horn here.
Hey, I'm Rick Schlesinger, co-founder and head of strategy and operations.
How you doing? I'm Buddy Deck, and I'm in charge of block production.
Hey, I'm Mike Haggerty, and I am lead software engineer.
Great. Yes, so this is our core team. We do have a number of other contributors, especially when it comes to breaking through into foreign markets where we want to be able to speak another language. So we have a couple translators that we work with as well as a designer that helps us make everything look pretty. So it was last year where Rick and myself we were enamored with EOS. And Rick had been following Dan for a while with BitShares and Steemit, and we had been active on Steemit. And we really saw with all of our research a lot of the problems that were coming into all the popular networks, especially with Ethereum and scaling and congestion. And we saw that EOS was directly addressing these head on, and with a number of very smart design decisions. So we started to follow that closely, and when we got to the topic of block production, we saw a kind of gap we're like, who are these block producers going to be? There's no one out there. Little did we know what was going on in China at the time, but in the English-speaking world, there was no one. So we looked at what we were doing with our lives and our careers, and we thought about what it could be like, being a block producer. And it really was the idea of not only like being the change you want to see in the world, if that's too corny, but it's also it's having the work you do be impactful and mean something, and be positive change. As corny as it sounds, it really comes down to that. So it's been a tremendous journey these past couple months of getting to know the community, learning a lot about various cultures around the world, different economic theories, different schools of thought in the Telegram channels. We see a kind of mishmash, a stadium of ideas, as I call it. And we do our best to try to put our ideas out there as much as possible so that people know who we are and they know where we stand. So that it's been a great ride so far.
And a lot of you, so you guys, because you're probably the most well-known of the block producers at this point, I'm sure a lot of folks watching would wonder, how did you guys get to where you are? I mean, you're very organized. It seems like you have a good plan, and your roadmap is excellent. A lot of folks have seen that as well. Can you talk more about your strategy and then your operations?
Sure. Funny you asked that. Someone was asking. First of all, thank you. We're always just trying new things, so ways to connect with the community and put our ideas out there. So we're happy that some of those things are working. When it comes to, what we've been doing and why it's maybe resonating with people, I think it's just because we have a good sense of identity. We talk a lot internally. We have, besides our standing. We have a standing status every Monday where we're just open-ended, talking about everything that's going on. We'll get on the phone and we'll just talk it out. We'll think out loud, and we have an idea of what we stand for and what we want to see, and what we want EOS, what we want to contribute to EOS, and what we hope EOS can become. And so I think it's just been putting that out there, and being confident in our identity, and some people, it resonated with some people, so we're very happy to see that.
Nice. Yeah, go ahead, Blue Jays.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, I follow you guys, and you're always putting valued stuff out there. You're creating content on Twitter and on Steemit, and there's some. I would encourage everyone to look you up on Twitter and Steemit as well too, for all the stuff that you guys put out. However, we want to move to a topic which is very on the minds of everyone, is basically, actually, Erik talked about the checks and balances just before on the last segment. And we have this question in the chat about resistance to corruption. So do you guys mind talking about that? What kind of checks and balances you see in place here, and how you guys can contribute to that, or see how that will play out?
Yeah, let me kick that off and then throw it over to Rick. I think he has a lot to say on the subject, but corruption is a very broad term, and if we're talking about corruption in block producers, I think it's absolutely possible that a corrupt actor can enter the space. We're creating mechanisms to remove corrupt actors from the space. But for block producers specifically, there really is no greater incentive to not screw up and to not screw up the network than with a block producer. I can tell you that it's a massive movement of just your individual life to campaign to become a block producer. So to be corrupt in a way that would eject you from an elected position and throw all that hard work away, because there's a lot of pre-work that goes into it, and it just seems unlikely there that somebody would intentionally work so hard to campaign and be elected. But for corruption and different attack vectors on the network, I know Rick has a lot to say on that.
Yeah, sure. I actually think Erik Hoel characterized it pretty well before, essentially talking about the checks and balances that are being built into the EOS software itself. I agree with him that, code can only take us so far. Corruption is really a human condition that we need to try to limit the best we can, and software can only limit it to a certain extent with ones and zeros. But I think what is nice about and really great about the EOS system is that what we're trying to incorporate is understanding of intent. And the understanding of intent takes a human element, and that is, I think, going to be very important for the network's health. So to answer your question around how do we, prevent corruption, I think the steps being taken with the Constitution, basically, essentially barring vote buying, and also enshrining the fact that block producers need to be financially independent and not tied to one another are important factors in the nascent days of the network in order to encourage good social norms and encourage good culture amongst the participants on EOS, along with the ability to have arbitrators come in and independently try to help interpret some of these when it might get a little bit gray. And that's why it's important to have independent arbitrators that are not elected. We cannot make arbitrators political. They should be independent entrepreneurs, and they should be transparent in their track records and understanding kind of where they've ruled in the past and whether or not they've been successful. And then finally, and most importantly, the voters. The voters need to be educated to a high degree to understand what this network is about, what we're trying to create, and they need to vote intelligently for good policy, good block producers, and the like.
And they have direct financial incentive to do that as well. It's very easy to think of your vote being lost in the fray when you think about modern day political elections, but here we're in such a emerging stage that the decisions we make in the beginning will have a massive effect on namely the price of the token. So we've authored a series called Your Vote Matters, and we're currently working on the third episode of that, which we'll probably get into it a little bit later. But it's to encourage thoughtful voting and to educate everybody on the different things you should consider when voting. So not necessarily how to vote, but how to interpret the circumstances to inform your vote.
Nice. Yeah, and you guys have a number of community benefit projects going. You were not only the Vote Matters, but also you released a project a couple weeks ago, or the beginnings of a project. I believe it's something about bandwidth and how to understand how much bandwidth you need for your DApp, which is a question we see quite often. And even Dan has
answered that in the chat as well. Can you guys talk more about your project?
Yeah, sure, Kevin. So the EOS Resource Planner is the project that you're talking about, and one of the biggest questions that DApp developers are asking, they're wondering, how much is it going to take to power my idea? How many EOS tokens will it take? And so we're planning to develop a tool that will answer this question. In the first phase, we plan to provide a point-in-time estimate of how much the staking costs will be to stake bandwidth, CPU, and also RAM. And then in phase 2, we plan to use the historical data that we will capture and perform predictive analytics to provide a realistic cost based on varying load times, seasons, and whatnot. So the plan is we're going to host this tool on a dedicated website, and we're also going to develop a REST API that will be open and available to the community. And then we're also going to widgetize the tool so that people, token leasing organizations like Chintai, for example, can embed that on their site.
Nice. That's cool.
One thing I want to add is that every time that we are, we understand that if elected, we will have a limited supply of tokens. And that inflation, which is what the entire network lives on, we have a responsibility to be efficient with it. So everything that we're doing now is practiced for then, right? And for every project we decide to put our limited time into, we want to make sure that it is scalable, that it creates the greatest impact. So this is not the most complex project, but simple can be powerful. And this project is absolutely necessary and can be scalable out to many, many different applications. And we saw the Chintai guys come on earlier, and that's, wow, I mean, what a massive project that is. And it's so cool that they're doing that. That is also extremely necessary. But we want to be able to take the ERP and we're create it as to be modular and slide it into Chintai so that it can help power that as well. And it just anywhere where it can fit on our website, a voting portal, you name it. That's why Mike is doing the API.
Are you guys baselining any of the performance results on the community testnet to get sort of performance data back for estimating how much resources you're going to need?
So we've started to. We've been waiting for a feature complete product that's worth testing, and I think with the release of Dawn v3, we've certainly gotten there, and definitely at the very least the right direction. We're headed in the right direction. So we've started our own internal testnet to do some testing, and obviously we will work in the plethora of community testnets that we're involved in to figure out, a good performance test to run.
Sure. I was going to ask about Dawn 3.0 because you guys were one of the first tweets talking about you fired up Dawn 3.0 pretty quickly after it released on GitHub. What were your initial thoughts there?
It was all hands on deck.
It's exciting event.
It was like Christmas, really. I mean, when it came out, I was like, oh my God, Rick and I were texting back and forth over it, and we were all in our private chat. But we were real excited. It's hard to sleep.
All hands on deck is a different meaning when your CTO's name is Deck.
Yeah.
Come on, Deck.
It was a very awkward night for me. No, so it was all hands on when they released, and we had it built and up and playing around with it almost immediately, like everybody else. All the guys in the community testnet for sure were little kids on Christmas morning, unpacking their presents. So like I said, the product seems pretty feature complete. Dan's obviously very excited. The guys at block.one are very excited about it, and I'm very excited about it. It's got some interesting things that I think are going to be very important for the future of the network. One of those is what Eric talked about earlier with the IBC, the inter-blockchain communication. I think he stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to talk about that if the topic came up, and it's definitely a way to scale without multi-threading. You could put certain aspects of the chain on a sub chain or a different chain and have it do all that stuff, and then you could bring it back to the main chain. So I think that's super beneficial to the community.
Speaking of which, block.one also has on their roadmap to bring out parallel and multi-threading. Do you think that will just explode the performance of these subnets, I guess you can call them?
Absolutely. The ability to scale horizontally is going to make this thing, hugely viable for things like the next Facebook or next Twitter or what have you. These things that require huge TPS. So anything to help with that, whether it's side chains or if it's multi-threading or sharding or what have you, it's going to help immensely.
Cool.
We should definitely bring up so you guys were on an interview recently in China, and I believe also EOS Union had you on as well. You guys have been doing a great job unifying the community and helping bring everybody together. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I was actually meeting with someone today who is considering candidacy out in Southeast Asia, and they were telling me that the first time the Chinese community had sort of got wind of us was when we reported on F2 Pool purchasing large swaths of EOS tokens and saying, hey, F2 Pool, if you guys are planning on being a block producer, welcome. And then from there, I think it really came to a head when we noticed that there were differences in how we treat, paying for voter dividends or kickbacks. It's a dividend if it's not as bad. It's a kickback if you think it's bad. That's right. And we reached out to EOS Gravity because we thought they were going one way with it, and they responded. We said this is how we believe. We respect EOS Gravity, and obviously we still do. They're doing a great job out there evangelizing EOS to the community. But we're not going to do that. That's fine for you though. But we want to bring to light this kind of dichotomy on this one issue so that it can be discussed in a very public way. And they responded, and I think that was the first kind of global discussion, albeit there was one call and response between the English-speaking world and non-English-speaking world. And I know that obviously not everybody west of China speaks English, but everybody does it pretty well in the Telegram, and none of us are talented enough to be multilingual. So I say it like that, so it's easy.
Yeah, we should also bring up, and you guys in Korea as well. I know you guys have been reaching out to everybody. It's been awesome. So what is next for EOS New York? I mean, we have 7 weeks till launch here. You guys you have surprises every week. It seems like. What's coming up?
Kevin, before we move on to that part, we did want to cover one more hot topic, which was the BP inflation, the percentage. What were your thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, and I want to make a clarification there because I'm sensing in the community. So we try to be very active in Telegram, very active in Twitter and Reddit and wherever the conversations are happening. And it seems that there may be a misconception in the community because there are some that believe or have used language that have led me to believe that they believe that inflation is set by the block producers, and that is not the case. Inflation is set at 5% by default. If we want to change that, we change it through 15 out of 21 BP vote. What BPs are actually setting is their percent revenue derived from that 5% inflation. So they can up to close to 5% set what they're going to get paid, but it's not actually setting the inflation. So for those people out there that are campaigning for having inflation be as low as possible, we can't help you right now. It is 5%. So just want to lay that distinction out there. And then also that inflation on EOS is similar to other blockchain networks in that it is how the network exists. It is the source of incentives for people to validate transactions, right? But in the way that it's been chosen to be designed on EOS, it is the mechanism that allows for feeless transactions. So block producers absolutely should be paid through inflation. It's that which enables feeless transactions. So I just wanted to set the stage there, and then we'll pass it over to Rick, because he's been working a lot on this.
Yeah, and thanks, Kevin. And inflation is, as Kevin was mentioning, the lifeblood of the network, and it needs to be treated as a scarce resource. And especially in the formidable years of a network, it is important to give or provide resources in a widely distributed manner to ensure the success of the network. So, and we've learned this from prior chains like BitShares, which their community voted to have 0% inflation, and then they could no longer, they had troubles finding block producers, and then they had trouble getting community projects kicked off. So we need to sort of rethink in the economic community what inflation means in crypto economics versus what it means in fiat economics, because they're very different. When you inflate a fiat currency, you're debasing the currency, and you're often giving it to friends and politically connected individuals. But with crypto economics, what you're doing is you're providing the resources to run the network. That's what you're doing. It's going to a productive use, and I think that we all need to do a better job of helping to educate one another on that concept. One other thing I'll mention is that, we can't have a thoughtful conversation about inflation with respect to, say, BP pay without first understanding the costs involved with running a block producer itself. So there's everything from server costs, vendor costs, paying your people, running a 24/7, 365 operation. Maybe you're paying some sort of tech support to help. So you need to have this sort of baseline understanding too. And so recently the community got together and we projected what we would expect a block producer to cost, both with one-time upfront costs to purchase all the equipment, and then also what your ongoing operating budget would be. And I'll just share a few of those numbers just so the community is aware, and I'm happy to link to this cost model. It's open source, you can play around, you can put in your own projections and everything like that. But when you look at one-time cost for a bare metal solution, you're looking at a range between about $300,000 all the way up to $1.6, $1.7 million. If you're really trying to build out a data center ready to go for this sort of network. And then your ongoing expense is anywhere between $900 to about $1.1, $1.2 million a year. So you have to have.
Hey, Rick, can you clarify if that was for the standby or top 21? Because I know you were projecting out across.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yes, that is just for a normal block production outfit, right? So that could be a standby or a top 21. The baseline is basically, and here's few key assumptions. For team members, a bare metal solution at either a co-located space or a proprietary facility, and that's what you need. And part of what I was mentioning earlier about, in the formidable years of a network, you need to provide for the resources so that this thing cannot be taken down either from a technical or a financial attack vector. So that's why we start with the baseline cost of how much this will cost to get up and running and how much it'll cost to be ongoing. So you're playing with those sorts of numbers, and you need to then work backwards and say, do we want 121 block producers that are ready to go, ready to spool up at a moment's notice if they get voted in or if you get dropped out of the top 21? I would venture a guess to say that the community does want that they do want a strong network with backups and standbys ready to go. So we need to take into account the ongoing expense of running one of these block producer standby units, and then work back and then work forwards from there. So again, the key takeaway is that there are technical and financial attack vectors, and we need to, if we can basically cover off on the financial attack vector, we're going to have a more secure, stable environment for this network to thrive into the future.
So the answer is we don't know what it should be yet.
We will learn.
Yeah.
But there is a balance between efficiency there's an efficient balance there.
Yeah, and it needs to be reevaluated. It's not like we have our bid for revenue from inflation, and then that's what it is for the next, however long we're elected for. It should be reevaluated in a number of times throughout the year, based on what the cost of the token is, the cost to run whatever the operation is, et cetera, et cetera.
And just to bring one last point, if we assume a token price of $6 indefinitely, which it is around today, and you're assuming, say, a $1.2 million operating budget, you are profitable as a block producer in that case. However, we've noticed that a break-even point is somewhere around $2.90. So if that token price ever dips below that, and you're also putting downward pressure on, say, BP inflation revenue, you're going to have a problem, because essentially you're going to be loss leading block producers, and I'm not sure how long they can stay in business running at a loss.
Wow, and we have the chat just fired up pretty quickly when we started talking about the inflation. So thank you for running some numbers here. Hopefully we can, as you said, education will be key. We'll have to keep bringing this up. What are the next steps for you guys? What is coming up with EOS New York?
Yeah, so next steps for us is inflation is a hot topic, and we're continuing on, like I said in the beginning of the discussion, with Your Vote Matters number 3. It's kind of inflation and inflation in the network, and I don't think that this is a topic. This topic is too big for EOS New York or any one block producer. So we've approached EOS 42 and EOS Sphere, who we respect, and we want to work with them to develop a kind of co-authored piece. And we've also brought on Multicoin Capital, which is a cryptocurrency fund, who is very knowledgeable in the space outside of EOS. So we don't want to just bring in the same kind of echo chamber thoughts that we've surrounded ourselves with, but somebody who really knows what's going on around the space and can provide those examples to have input as well. So there's that. We are continuing with our meetups. We're trying to schedule one for this month. I believe OCI, Object Computing, is having a tutorial on developing on EOS. We want to support that. We've got our I'll just mention our blockchain and beers that we have quite frequently in the city. Scott Minter, shout out to you. He's planning that for this Thursday. We've also brought on a new advisor, and the reason why that's really important is one of the items on our roadmap is to deploy and fund research on consortium blockchain economics and how we are affected and how we make decisions. So Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about our new advisor?
Yeah, and so this is some new information, and we'll look to put out a post with more information either tomorrow or Wednesday. But Leah Palagashvili has graciously agreed to become one of our advisors. She is an economist at SUNY Purchase, and she also does a lot of research with the New York University School of Law. So it's NYU Law. Her background, we can get into and I can link to, but she's a Forbes 30 under 30 recipient. She's been published in the Wall Street Journal and multiple other media outlets. She talks about governance, regulations when it comes to entrepreneurship and businesses. She does a lot of stuff with financial technology. And, because her background in economics is also she has knowledge about Austrian economics and other sorts of aspects, we just view her as being key to advising us and advising the community on how to be successful. And we will look to her for a lot of guidance, and we hope that the community will find what she produces in terms of research to be valuable to as well. And she will be focusing on doing research directly on the EOS economic system itself, as well as the governance aspects. So we'll be providing her data, and she can be writing research and other sorts of reports on that.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's something that we have been lacking in EOS. Probably many cryptocurrencies, if you want to call them that, could use an economist rather. Could certainly benefit from an economist. So.
Absolutely. And plus some of this stuff, I mean, is frankly going to be learned as we go. We can draw upon past economic learnings, but there's a lot of new ground to cover when it comes to incentive structures and sort of what might become a firmless world with just DAOs operating. So there's so much exciting stuff to come that you need sort of all smart people hands on deck.
You said it.
Helping. So, people like Erik Hoel, people like Leah Polagashvili. So, everyone.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you, friend. We look forward to that announcement. Go ahead, Blue Jays.
I was just going to say, thanks for bringing in such highly qualified people to the community. I think it's great that we're not just a sounding board and an echo chamber, right? And like we're just hearing each other talk. It's great to have that perspective and opinion.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But the last, and I can't actually say it yet, but there are a few other surprises because we're trying to look past June and what are going to be the, we were talking about whether or not vote buying, it should be in the Constitution. We're talking about what is appropriate for inflation. We're trying to look at what these very important debates are going to be up until June and after June, and there's some fun things that we're working on that we think are going to be extremely valuable to the community. We're excited to bring you more once we're able to have something show.
Nice. That sounds great. Well, thank you guys for coming on. We know we always enjoy talking to you guys. We've seen you around the community, and I'm sure we'll see more of you around all the chats. Where can folks get a hold of you? And website and Twitter and
kind of you name it. So we're EOS New York everywhere. On Twitter, where we're very active, but I'm EOS New York on Telegram. We have a channel for just EOS New York chat, which is really just it's like just a smaller community where you can ask us questions directly if you ever have them, or what have you. So that's EOS New York chat in Telegram. And our website is eosnewyork.io. You can sign up and subscribe to our email list where we send out regular updates about what we're doing and what's happening in the community as well. So thank you very much for all of you out there who are supporting us currently. We would not be able to do anything without your support. So thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, thank you guys, and we'll see you around, and have fun up in New York.
Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Kevin and Blue Jays, thank you for all the work you're doing. It's very important. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks,
You're
Mike.
welcome.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you. It was fun talking to those guys. Most we ever had all at once. That was great.
That's right. We should have an all hands on deck, but we don't have a deck on our team, so we might have to recruit a deck.
Maybe that's the next step, huh? I never thought about doing that before, but
Sounds like
we have Mr. Cox. Yeah, he's been waiting in the wings here, and he should be coming on fairly shortly here. Sorry, Mr. Cox. So we have a lot of questions this week, and we may have to cut them a little short. As you can see, it depends on how long he has areas. Mr. Cox, wow, that no beard, the hair looks good. Boy, is he ready to go.
Greetings and salutations. Delighted to be on yet again. Wow, I was listening to the EOS New York guys. Wow.
Yeah.
Such good stuff.
Yeah, they're always providing a lot for the community. It's cool. They're bringing in economists. I think it's about time we're bringing some expert help in the economics area. So sounds good to me, right?
You're here.
So let's jump right into it. The questions. We have a long list this week. Let's go ahead and see what we have.
Absolutely. Before you get the first question up, I will do my ritual disclaimer. I will hopefully do it at the end as well. My name's Thomas Cox. I am a blockchain governance expert, and I'm very active in the EOSIO ecosystem, and I am not speaking for anyone but myself. All my answers are just my opinion or my belief from being active in the community. I'm not a spokesperson for any company of any kind. So I will do my best to give accurate answers, and I can't promise or warranty that I'm right on any of them. Doing my best here. So that's my disclaimer. Go.
All right. First question. Let's do it here. Gerard from EOS Gov chat. he's talking about DAC tokens being securities, and if that DAC would indeed be considered a security, if it's considered a security, say somewhere in the U.S., could that potentially be dangerous for the entire EOS chain in that area or country?
Right. So, Gerard, great question. Thank you for that. So what he's talking about is there are a number of people who are wanting to create decentralized autonomous collectives or corporations, DAOs, if you will, DACs. And one of the ways they're doing that is creating some sort of entity where there will be tokens that'll be good for voting on the direction of the organization as a whole. And they're planning to airdrop a bunch of the tokens, maybe even a controlling stake. It's not clear. It depends on which group it is, onto EOS accounts, so that if you and I had EOS accounts, then we would get some of their tokens and we would be shareholders, sort of. And the more you make a token connected, my understanding is, and I'm an amateur, I am not a securities lawyer, but I've been trying to understand this. And my best understanding so far is if the holder of one of these, DAC tokens is entitled to something and somebody else owes him something like a fiduciary duty or owes him decision rights or owes him dividends or any sort of you've made this expectation that, hey, in exchange for this token, even if I give it to you for free, you have somebody else is now obligated to you. That's a lot like a security, like indistinguishable, probably, maybe. Please talk to a lawyer, a good one. And now, then the question is, if people do that on top of EOS, does that make EOS a security? And again, not a lawyer. My best guess is no. That you can have all sorts of things built on top of EOS that don't make EOS into something it isn't. And all efforts are being made to make sure that EOS tokens are not securities. You'll notice if you ever go and read the purchase, we don't talk about the ICO, but if you go to the purchase page for EOS tokens today as ERC20 tokens, it's like, these tokens aren't actually good for anything. You're not entitled to anything. There's no obligation on anybody's part to do anything in exchange for you, to you, with you. So it's like, how clearly can that be made into not a security? And again, big design consideration on the governance side, and just the whole design of the platform is to make sure the EOS token cannot ever be considered a security. So that's the current thinking as of today, the 9th of April.
Let's move on. We have a question from Alexandra Bourget from EOS Canada. I'd love to have more technical details about the implementation of arbitration as well as Ricardian contract integration. Are those going to be other system contracts deployed that we'll use? It was my understanding that people would sign the Ricardian contracts when using a WASM contract, but that doesn't seem implemented as of now.
Right. So, by the way, big shout out to Alexander Bourget, who's doing amazing work, along with several other folks on the EOS BIOS boot process. Just tremendous work that he's doing. He's such a contribution to the community. We're so glad he's involved. And I, too, would like more technical details about the implementation of arbitration because we're building that right now. So I can't give more details than are currently in my head. But I will say, yes, there will be arbitration contracts such that if you were being named as a respondent in arbitration, there'd be a place you could go to look. And will there be, let's see, Ricardian contract integration. So this is actually really interesting, and we're just starting to roll that out. It's not in the 3.0 distribution fully yet, I don't think. It may be coming shortly. It might have made it in, actually. And it goes like this. If you take a system contract like transfer, where you transfer EOS tokens from one person to another, or transfer anything from one person to another, the code asks you to say who it's from, who it's to, how many, and some little memo where you have some words in there about, like on a check where you have why am I writing this check? To remind yourself why you're doing it. So it's asking for these 4 things, but it's totally mechanistic. There's no statement of the intention of you or the recipient or anybody in making a function call like that. But the Ricardian contract is actually what's binding you, and there's a Ricardian contract for the transfer function. I know that because I'm writing it right now. And it says, I, from, because you're the from person probably, intend to send amount to 2, and I stipulate that I own these tokens or I'm entitled to send them, and that I think we're saying that we require you to know who you're sending things to, so you'll have to stipulate that you know who the recipient is, and that I'm not facilitating fraud, and maybe 2 or 3 other things. And when you look at we're building the Ricardian contract as a text file with 2 curly brackets around those parameter fields, so that it's very easy for a web designer to pull that up and use what's called like the mustache or the handlebars standard to show that to you and highlight that field and show you that your name is going to go here, the recipient's name is going to go here, and here's the English text you're agreeing to when you transfer. And so it's not being done on the chain because the chain doesn't have a display function. It's going to be done in the web browser, assuming you implement it correctly. And our current plan is to release a standard implementation that people can copy and borrow from and so forth. So that's the thinking, is that every system contract will have a system Ricardian contract matching 1-to-1, parameter for parameter. And you'll see the Ricardian contract when you try to invoke the system command in a browser. And you should do the same thing as a web developer or as a dApp developer. Anything you say, like, I want to move my pawn to, Queen's Bishop 3 in the chess game, there might be something in there about, and I'm not cheating, or, and I'm not running an AI to help me. I don't know what the heck they would say, but they'd say something. If you were buying or selling something, you might have a stipulation, and I actually have the title to the stuff that I'm selling, and it's not stolen goods. All the things that you don't say in code, you can say in the Ricardian contract, which means it's like, well, that doesn't stop a bad person. Yes, but they just signed it, which means if they're lying, you can go after them through arbitration, which goes to the other half of his question: how's arbitration going to work? And I actually just did a video this morning, and I'm doing another one in 2.5 hours, doing an arbitration orientation, and those will both be recorded, and the better of the 2 recordings will be posted online, so you can go look at that to learn more, because we will eat up all the time trying to talk about the mechanics of arbitration here. And thank you, Alexander, for the question and for your work. Awesome. It's an awesome guy. Okay, next.
Nice. Yeah, let's go to Roger Davies. This is from EOS Nottingham. And he talks about automatic. He's got 4 questions. We'll do a couple. Automatic scope detection, where it says the block producers are responsible for determining which data ranges are accessed and to deconflict them. What does that mean, and what will it require?
Right. So I don't know the details of that because that's not my area. What I do know is that block producers are responsible for ordering the transactions, because when you're a block producer, there's this mempool of shared transactions that all the block producers share with each other. When you get a new transaction in, you share it with everybody else so everyone can see all the transactions. And when it's your turn to make a block, you grab a bunch of them out of the mempool and you order them in some sequence, right? And the ordering is up to you. And that's referencing that fact that you as block producer can order them in a way that minimizes, reduces, or eliminates certain kinds of conflicts, the details of which I barely comprehend. In fact, maybe I don't even comprehend them at all. But that's the point, is there's something in there about the ordering and the sequencing of transactions. And I would actually ask Bart in the developer channel more on that. He or Matt or one of the other developers could totally answer that off the top of their head. So that's what that means.
Nice. Yeah. Let's see what the next question for him. He's talking about what does it mean to launch a BP where it says, we strongly encourage BPs at EOSIO based. Oh, okay. So let's go on to this one. So if someone casts their votes and then 3 days later votes for another block producer, and say this action causes the block producer to drop from position 21 to 23, how will that process be handled?
Right. So how do people get in or out of the circulation? So every round is made up of a known set of producers, and then those producers decide amongst themselves what their own sequence will be to minimize latency. So they have to chat with each other to set up their ordering and agree on it. And then they publish the order. And then if you miss your spot, you've missed your block. And we're always checking the total votes every time we make a new round, because every round might be new producers. And you need to know in advance, okay, so next round, who's producing next round? And so in this round, we're checking probably a few seconds into the current round, you'll go and you'll check all the votes. And by the time you get to finality on the current block, it's clear who the current 21 are for next block. And then they'll chat amongst themselves and set up their order. And it might be the same ones, right? But if one of them changes, if number 21 drops to 23, clearly somebody else got moved up to 21. And so the set of block producers would have changed, which shows up in the vote total, which is done every 126 seconds. It used to be every 63, but it's now 12 half-second blocks per producer times 21 producers. So it's a 6-second turn where you make 12 blocks, then the next block producer does 12 blocks, and the next one, and so on. And so 6 seconds times 21 producers is 126 seconds, or 2 minutes and 6 seconds. So every 2 minutes and 6 seconds, the block producer lineup could change. And if the vote totals change, then that's what happens.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. We'll go on to Mayada Jeffrey. He's from the forums, and he's talking about, we're running short on time to order equipment, and when can we expect recommended EOS block producer hardware recommendations from block.one?
Right. That was brilliantly answered on the prior segment by EOS New York, who were we had 73 block producing folks, individuals from various block producers, working on a cost model that Dan Larimer asked for, that I passed that on to the Block Pros channel. And in about 4 days, they just swarmed it. They did amazing work and came up with a very detailed cost model for what we think an average, quote unquote, block producer would probably maybe need, based on the fact that we don't really know how popular we're going to be, or how many users there'll be, or what applications will get distributed, or anything like that. So it really is a best guess, and it's what there is. So I would say totally go check that out, and then do your own napkin math and make some guesses and move forward.
Okay, let's move on to Samu Paha from the forums. Would it be possible to let users decide themselves how long the lockup time will be?
Right, that's the lockup time for tokens to do things like vote and to be reserved for bandwidth and CPU. And the short answer is the users themselves can amend the Constitution and the code and the default settings at any time via referendum, and a majority will rule, probably a supermajority, I suspect. And if people really would like to change the lockup time, they absolutely can. That is configurable. And his next question was, can we incentivize longer lockup times by giving more voting power? Again, that's just writing new algorithms for the voting math, which is implemented. I believe that part is also part of the large section of functionality that's implemented as WebAssembly, which means it is fully upgradable without a hard fork. So yes, absolutely, through an amendment process, you could change either or both of those things.
I would also think that having a dynamic lockup time is not going to be good for token mechanics and economics as well.
Oh, I have no opinion one way or the other on the economics of it. But if the question is, can we do it? Oh, you totally can do it. You could make the lockup 10 years. I'm not recommending that, but I'm saying you could do it because it's configurable.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it says here, according to Sandwich, apparently something like 45 to 70% of tokens are currently held on exchanges. If it says that at the same level after the blockchain is launched, exchanges could use those tokens of their customers to vote. This can easily be prevented by having longer lockup times, because exchanges need liquid tokens.
Right. So to understand that, you need to know how token ownership is reflected on the blockchain versus in exchanges. So let's say, exchange Foobase has 100,000 EOS tokens that are actually technically owned by their members or by their customers, but when they got transferred into the exchange over on the blockchain, it just shows that the exchange is the owner of record from the blockchain's perspective. And then there's an internal ledger inside Foobase where they track like which of their customers owns those individual tokens. And that's why they're able to do exchanges between their tokens very quickly, because they're just changing their own ledger. They're not changing blockchain ledgers. And they're often dealing with very slow ledgers like, Ethereum and Bitcoin. I don't know whether or not you'll find exchanges running directly on the EOS blockchain, that'll be much faster, but they'll probably still do that internal ledger thing. It has its advantages. I suspect strongly that we are going to make a constitutional provision that when you cast a vote, you are stipulating that you are the actual owner and not just the custodian of the shares or the tokens you're voting. Exchanges are custodians, right? If you bought them and they're holding them for you, they don't own them from a legal perspective. And that's what we're going to say in the vote contract. So if an exchange started voting their customers' tokens, that would be a violation of our rules. Now, it's been done. There've been exchanges out there that have voted their customers' tokens in order to control the rule sets on certain block changes, or so I've been told. And I think it's important that if you are a custodian and you cast a vote, that you got to be able to prove that you got a proxy or a proxy equivalent from somebody and they instructed you how they'd like their tokens voted. So good luck with that.
I also have to say how much. Oh, go ahead.
It might be much better to just like not vote other people's tokens when they have done you the courtesy of letting you hold them for them.
That's how you see an exchange collapse, by trying to vote with EOS tokens and then losing those tokens. That could be a problem.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, the actual owners would get them back because we're the rule of law chain, but it could be. It would be awkward.
Yeah,
it would be awkward. I think if we make it clear what the rules are in advance, then people will behave properly.
We have to make sure we say congratulations on Foobase. That's a great name. I also, Vinny the Vapid Voter and Carl the corrupt BP candidate. You're good at naming these things there, Thomas.
I'm going to write children's stories in my spare time.
Let's go on to
Aaron. That's a reference to an article I wrote on Medium, by the way, if you haven't read that.
Yeah, he wrote a great article about arbitration story about blockchain vote buying and corruption by Thomas Cox. It is a great article.
Why it's wrong and how it would get crushed like a bug by the arbitration process.
Nice.
So don't even bother because you'll get caught and you'll get punished.
Perfect. Answer a lot of questions. Aaron Schneider asked a great question in private message. I had never even thought about this before, but he's asking if voter turnout is largely expected to be community driven, will any incentivization models at the DApp level be permissible?
That's a great question. I'm curious. You would have to make sure that your incentivization wasn't for voting in a particular way, but just voting in general. And I'm not sure what you could afford to give away to 1 billion tokens that wouldn't bankrupt you. And having said that, I've, in my spare idle moments thought that you should, have like $1 off admission at certain places if you're like an organ donor or something. So when people voluntarily do good things, I think other folks should just sort of recognize that and do them nice little turns in exchange. You would have to be careful how you incentivized. You would have to be sure not to incentivize specific kinds of voting. Like, oh, you voted for the right guy. Here's an incentive. You just paid for a vote. But hey, you cast your votes. Yay, you get special access, like little gold VIP icon next to your name on the forum that we run. That's like totally, I can't see how that would be a problem. So we'll see. It'd be case by case. You just need to be careful and read the text of the Constitution once we release it.
Yeah, his question kind of reminded me of the whole turbo tokens idea that Ava put out a while back.
Yeah, how to find ways to give DApp providers some sort of franchise, some sort of control, and also developers generally. So there's a lot of thoughts and questions going on, and we have not, of course, released the governance roadmap where any future plans on that would be disclosed. So it really still is just one token, one vote for now.
Sounds good. Let's see here. Go ahead, Blue Jays.
Yeah, so it says here, and this is from Aaron Schneider as well, would it be possible for a small nested group with its own constitution to impose a mandatory block producer voting rule at the EOSIO level on its members?
I love that question. I got to say, and I want to say, by the way, Mayada, Jeffrey, Samapaha, thank you for your questions. And you also, Aaron Schneider. And I thought about that. I'm like, would that be okay? It's like, on the one hand, I wouldn't necessarily want to belong to an organization like that, but we are seriously about freedom and the free association. And, if you wanted to, you could set up a community where it was mandatory to get face tattoos. Okay. You could do that. I wouldn't join, but you could do it. As long as you didn't coerce people, as long as it was voluntary, you could totally do that.
Unless it looked like a goatee, maybe.
Yeah. We'll get the goatee tattoo. Yeah. That sounds tacky. So could you have a mandatory block producer voting rule in your nested group? I can't see why not. As long as you're not paying people to vote in a particular way. If you vote for A over B, then you get some benefit. And if you vote for B over A, you don't get that benefit. Now that's paying for a vote. But just like, we're the club of people who vote. And to belong, you have to vote. And it's like your membership gets revoked if you stop voting. It's like, okay. Just don't do the face tattoo thing. All right. Don't take my examples to heart, please.
Don't be Mike Tyson.
Don't be. No face tattoos.
No.
Unless you like them. Okay. If that's your thing, I'd say go for it. Because there's some amazing face tattoos out there. I've seen some that I'm thinking, damn, if I looked as good as that, I would get that face tattoo also. Wow. But I don't. The Maori, oh my, they are badass. They are hardcore. There's some face tattoos out there that are amazing. All right. Just going to go on the record and say, I admire it from a distance. I'll never get one.
Are those the ones that they do with the sticks and they kind of...
I think so.
Yeah.
We're so off topic now, but this is an interesting discussion. I should stop it with the examples. I really should.
If Thomas Cox shows up at your meetup with a face tattoo, you'll know what happened.
I lost a bet of some magnitude.
You see that other question by Aaron Schneider? This is a good one too. Do you ever see the need for being a need for BPs to voluntarily commit to some kind of annual audit or review of financial statements?
That's a really interesting question. My best guess is it'll be a little bit like we saw in the U.S. presidential campaigns. Prior to Richard Nixon, nobody who was a candidate for president ever released their personal financial records. It just wasn't a thing. And then there was some scandal about whether or not Nixon had received some bribe or something. Someone gave him a dog for his kid. It was like, oh my God, he's going to change foreign policy because he got a dog, right? And he gave his famous checkers speech, apparently, which I never saw, but I heard about. And he released all of his financials. And then it became this standard thing that all presidential candidates released all their financial records all the time because nobody wanted to be the one who didn't. So that's the kind of level where that might operate, where it might become something that voters are asking for, or that voting rating groups and agencies might be voting. I don't know. I don't think you'll see it at the base code level as a requirement, but it could easily be something that's just like there's this groundswell of everyone expects it, and then you don't get voted for if you don't. Maybe, who knows? That's the most likely.
Another BP question: what happens if the 121 block producer number is not met? Are all candidates automatically voted in?
Probably yes. And I promise you, I'm gonna find a Mac Mini and plug it in, and I'll be 121. I'm not really gonna do that.
Might as well. Yeah, you can fit it in that file cabinet back there.
It's a conflict of interest for me. I can't do that.
Oh well.
I think about it, but I couldn't do it.
I think we know someone else with Mac Minis who might be interested in that as well.
Yeah, Ian, we're talking about you.
There you go. Ross Go from the forums, he's asking about names on EOSIO. He has 3 different questions about them, but basically, how will the naming work when launched, and do all accounts have to be created by the EOSIO account name?
At one point, the rule was that any account can make another account, and I don't know if we've changed that or not. I don't think I'm 99% sure that the EOSIO account, which is the account that's used to create the chain at BIOSboot, actually gets disabled soon after and never logs in again and never does anything. So it would either be block producers, or it would just be somebody with an existing account who's willing to give you create an account and give you the control of it because you asked for it. Account creation occurs by the create account command, where you pass in 2 public keys. So you can have somebody else do it for you. You hold back your private keys, give them your public keys, and say, here, make me an account. Here's $1, or here's a smile. I don't know, whatever they want. So it won't be the EOSIO account doing all the creation. It might be semi-centralized in block producers. It might be totally decentralized and anybody can do it. I'm not sure right now. I think that might be in flux. It's been a while since I was in that conversation.
And following up to that, what is done to prevent name squatting?
Nothing.
Huh. Okay.
And if you use somebody else's name to defraud anybody, you've just committed a crime and you're liable for sanctions.
I think, yeah, actually Dan said something about that the other day too.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. Cool. And let's talk, he also asked about whether 13 characters is enough for account names.
Well, as long as you don't mind if it's a string of letters and numbers that aren't too close to your name. I did the math on that, and the possible combinations exceed like 10 to the 18th power of possible name combinations, which is like enough for every man, woman, and child on the planet to have like 1 billion names each. So I don't think it's a problem.
Human population has a long way to go before we have an issue there.
It's like every device in my house could be independently named, and I'd be, names to spare.
And the Awakenment from the forums, he's asking about how does block.one plan on creating and allocating its 10% stake?
Right. Basically, we're going to create an account with a lockup in it, and it'll be issued its tokens at startup. And it just sits there and it unlocks 10% per year. I think it's on either an annual or a monthly basis, most likely, is how those will unlock just slowly over time. And the whole backstory on that's in the original white paper, if you want to look at that.
And this is the question I think has been asked before, but will those 10% be a voting block all at once, or will it be released 10% at a time?
Right. So here's this account with 100 million EOS tokens in it on day one. Will they all be available to be voted? None, some, just the ones released. And the answer is they will all be available to be voted. Dan said that in chat a couple times ago, like a week ago, and he told me that as well when I asked him directly. So yes, the current plan is that block.one will have a not insignificant number of tokens that can vote if it chooses to do so, which I'm sure it very well may. Somebody asked him how they would be voted, and he said something to the effect of, in our best interest, which is typical cryptic Dan.
As Erik Hoel called it, the executive branch in action there.
Indeed.
Yeah. David F. from the forums, he's asking about, I understand that anything in EOS is subject to arbitration, and how about fungibility? Does this mean that we have to look at who is giving the EOS and make sure they received it without stealing or selling goods that were not legal?
Yes, just as you have to do in the real world.
Yeah.
If you buy a pair of extremely cheap stereo speakers out of somebody's trunk in a parking lot somewhere, and then you discover they were stolen and they're taken from you, that's the same thing that can happen on the blockchain, guys. Don't be buying stuff that you aren't confident is being sold to you in good faith by somebody who has title to them. So someone with no reputation and no performance bond and isn't part of a mutual aid society or a merchant's guild and can't prove to you simple things like, so how do you own this? Dude, stop it. Don't buy shady things. Or do and get them confiscated.
It sounds like more and more the watchdog job will be a popular one, or possibly a lucrative one on the blockchain. It's just unwinding all these transactions.
Yeah, well, finder fees. It's like, oh, like I found some stolen, whatever the virtual equivalent of stereo speakers are.
Yeah. And then let's see. So how does the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation proposed by the European Commission, how does that affect EOS? Is there anything that needs to be done before launching EOS?
Yeah, super question. Really good question. Because the GDPR includes a number of provisions on protecting customer data, one of which is a requirement that customer data must be able to be deleted, which on a blockchain is impossible. And so it's not just EOS, it's every blockchain has to go, what do we do with that? And the short answer is I've read as many articles as I can find that include GDPR and blockchain. And all the articles I found so far say, yeah, that's a real problem. And they don't have good answers. However, there's an organization, just as one example, called EOSIO that is going to be deploying, they said on the EOS blockchain. They are a medical records organization. And that's like, wow, that's incredibly sensitive. You're going to stick that on a blockchain where everyone can see it? Oh my God. And they say they're going to use zero knowledge proofs and encryption and 3 or 4 other elements to provide the security and the safety and the protection. that are necessary. And I think their design is going to be the kind of thing I would be looking at if I were holding client commercial information. I'd probably hold it off chain for the most part, frankly. And I would have to look very closely at how I would comply with GDPR. Because if you're on the internet, you're everywhere. And if you're on a blockchain, you're global. And GDPR is probably going to apply to you. In fact, I'm pretty confident it will. So I think the dApp developers really need to be looking at that. And that's not an EOS thing. That's a blockchain thing. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to know.
Yeah, makes sense.
If I could tell you how, I would totally tell you how at this very moment. I just don't know.
At least we can say that there will have to be some kind of technical controls on a regulation level for that thing to...
I think someone's going to come up with a reference implementation that addresses a lot of it, and we're all going to go, oh, thank you, and then, emulate them or copy them in some way.
We have one question on the chat here. First off, Joseph Hitt says, thanks for coming on, and thanks for going to Atlanta as well. Does inter-blockchain communication also imply atomic swaps?
Yeah, we are definitely at the outer edges of my knowledge, my technical knowledge, and my remit. Inter-blockchain communication is not something where I'm comfortable giving firm answers. I would say that there's some good information in the dev chat that the core developers who are working on inter-blockchain communication could answer. But I can't do it with any confidence. I know a lot. I don't know that.
Thomas, I have a question here. So we know that you've been going to all these meetups all over the place. Are you in a plane right now and just disguising it as your office?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm doing my best not to travel on Mondays so that I can continue to do the QA.
Oh, thank you.
I will say I'm expecting to be on a video attendance at the Moscow meetup on April 11th. And I've got Charlotte, North Carolina, tentatively on the 29th. And I'll be physically in Salt Lake City on, I think it's I shouldn't have to think. I can go look it up. Just a second if you're curious. By the way, there's going to be some really cool governance tour t-shirts being made. EOS Atlanta has committed to making some, and their design is available for other meetups. So whether you're having me or not, but certainly if you're having me in as a guest, I think it would be awfully cool to have EOS governance tour t-shirts for limited edition for folks. And if they're there when I get there, I will totally sign them. April 17th, Salt Lake City. April 18th, Dallas, Texas. April 19th, Austin, Texas. And April 20th, Blacksburg, Tennessee. And
there's a Blacksburg in Tennessee as well.
I'm sorry. Did I say Tennessee? I keep saying it. Blacksburg, Virginia. Okay. There's a Blacksburg in like 4 or 5 states, actually. No, Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm sorry.
Okay.
My mind is drifting.
Yeah, that's what we noticed. Well, last week after you leave, we always do our news and meetups segment, and that's when we first realized that every single one, Thomas Cox.
I want to thank Atlanta, by the way, for giving me a chance to sort of give the inaugural governance talk using just, again, it's like my own presentation, it's my own slides, and awesome questions. There was a fellow there, Michael, I think it was. Yeah, Michael from the local Bitcoin group, he's not an EOS fan, but he's a blockchain fan. He had some really tough questions. He grilled me like a fish, and it was awesome.
Was he happy at the end with your answer?
He said he was, okay. And I felt like I did the best job possible answering his questions, and they were all very legitimate questions. So I got to say, I love it when someone who is committed and skeptical, wants and asks for and even demands the answers that they need for them to be comfortable with whatever it is they're going to do.
That's right. We don't want to be an echo chamber. So
yeah, we want skepticism and variety and challenge, because we're not trying to make a bubble. We're trying to make software. Yeah. So the more skeptical and difficult you are now, the better the software will be.
Yeah.
And the better the governance will be. So,
and speaking of which, that's why we hold these Q&A sessions, right? And it's open for everybody. So please submit your questions, and Thomas will answer them as best as he could.
Totally.
Yep. and pretty much the whole world will have governance T-shirts from Atlanta by the time.
Or other places, because you can have a different. I think it was Steve Floyd from EOS Atlanta did the designs, and he did designs for like every city that asked for one. So there's like, and they're really beautiful too. There's this huge chestahedron. It's transparent, and through it you can see a skyline of whichever city it is. It says EOS, PDX for Portland, or EOS ATL for Atlanta. Wow. They're lovely, and I think could make a very cool limited edition collector's item. And I'm planning to get one of each.
Wow!
So I will never have to go for T-shirts again for many years. I'll have like 20 shirts.
Wow!
But since they're limited edition, they'll more likely be hung up behind you in the office there, probably framed.
Yes, I'll put them up as trophies.
Yeah, figured. Well, thank you as always, Thomas. Sorry we had to bring you on a little bit late. But
not at all. The EOS New York segment was fabulous.
Yeah, they always bring a lot. And thanks for coming on. We'll compile more questions for next week. Is there anything people should know about you before you go? Any questions that you're...
I've had some people ask me if I would just record a quick video hello for their meetup or for their group. And if I'm going to do it for anyone, I should do it for everyone. So yes, if you would like, email me or telegram me and say, I would like a video hello from you. I'll record it right here in this office, unless I'm somewhere else, and then I'll record it wherever I'm at. And I'll say hello to your group. And welcome you to the EOS community, and say thank you for being a member, because I'm really glad you're here, because we need everybody. We need everybody's help. In fact, I'll tell you what crossed my mind. Can I just read this?
Sure.
For this, I think this is important. I think it's tremendously important that all the different groups that are forming self-organize and start to create the foundations for our community. Create meetups, create block producers, create DApps, create arbitration panels, and on and on. And I'm just speaking as a fellow member of this exciting community of people who are all around the world, who are so excited by the potential of decentralized applications and decentralized ledger technology. And we can see the potential it has to maybe change the world. And for that to succeed, we're going to have to do a couple of things. I believe we're going to have to get to know each other as human beings. We're going to have to extend each other the benefit of the doubt, while also being skeptical and demanding trustworthiness and accountability, and offering trustworthiness and accountability. I think we're going to have to communicate very carefully and thoroughly and clearly. And we're going to have to ask each other for help, and give that help and volunteer and give freely to the community from whatever your strength may be. If you're a designer, if you're a thought leader, if you're an analyst, if you're someone who's just good talking to groups, whatever your skill is, somebody needs that. And we need you. And in the weeks and the months and the years ahead, I'm going to be calling on people all throughout the community for help on whatever project I'm working on. And I want you to ask me for help as well. So welcome to the greater EOS community. I'm looking forward to seeing you around.
Wow, that was amazing.
That was awesome. That was great.
Thanks, Thomas.
We're every word is true.
We're proud to have you as part of this community as well.
I tell you, I don't think the community would exist in its current form without the work of EOS Go.
No. Thank you. Well, and of course, part of it is thanks to you as well, Thomas, because you've been...
I do my best, but of course, there would have been no one for me to help if you hadn't said, I want help.
Well, we always appreciate it. Yeah.
Any day, my friend, any day. See you in a week.
See you in a week, sir.
Thomas.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Good night.
Bye. Oh, man. That was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good statement that he had there at the end. I wonder if he does that at the meetups or...
Yeah, I was wondering if are we recording it? Should we send that out to all the meetups, or is he doing personalized ones, or both?
I think he's doing personalized ones. Yeah,
that's what it seems like.
Cool.
Yeah, personalized T-shirts and personalized Thomas greetings and everything. Let's go right into the news. Are you ready there, Blue Jays?
Yeah, I was thinking of a personalized Thomas bobblehead, but the ones they give out at the ballpark. Yeah.
You want one? You're gonna put it on your desk there? It'll just bobble.
Talk about governance.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be nice if he's talking and then your bobblehead is also going at the same time. It would be exciting for the viewers, I'm sure.
All right, let's go to the news.
Yeah, we have a lot of news this week, and breaking news tonight, Novogratz. We're going to get to that in a moment. First, let's go ahead and talk about Thomas's arbitration article, which we mentioned with him just briefly. Carl, the corrupt candidate, and Vinny, the vapid voter. So basically, Thomas, he wrote a story about blockchain vote buying and corruption, and he goes through it He explained it himself pretty well, but basically you do not want to buy votes. You can have your funds frozen or even taken away through arbitration. All kinds of reasons why it's a bad idea. And he just lays it out very clearly in the Medium article. What were your thoughts on that there, Blue Jays?
It's a well laid out article, and I encourage everyone to just go and just look through it and think about the situation and how EOS is going to have this arbitration branch, and it's going to have these levels of government, like people have mentioned before, that can prevent corruption. And that's what it's all about. It's like Thomas mentioned before, we are the chain of the rule of law. So, right?
Yeah, this is the... go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is the first attempt really on blockchain to have this kind of governance, excuse me. So we are kind of the first guinea pigs trying this out. And it will be a messy process, most likely. We're going to learn a lot as we go. But we're trying to avoid as many complications as possible. And one of those things, I feel like a watchdog group is going to be a big deal, because you'll have all these backdoor deals possibly that could happen, where A pays B and then B to C and C to D, a very complicated web that needs to be unwound. I just feel like that could become an issue, and we need very good watchdogs on the chain that can sort of unroot these things and be paid some kind of reward or ransom. I suppose maybe a worker proposal will exist for those kind of ransoms, maybe, or those funds will be confiscated and given to the watchdog group. Who knows? It's always
the tools are there for all of these things to happen, so it's going to be exciting to see. The tools are laid out.
As always, yeah. Governance is an ongoing. It's one of those things where we could just discuss it. Actually, I pulled up the governance channel today, EOSIO Gov, 550 new messages.
Yeah.
I just started scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and we all know that feeling, right? So if you want more debate on arbitration or any kind of governance, go ahead and go to the EOSIO Gov channel. You will have your appetite whetted over there, for sure. Let's move over to Testloop. Now, they have announced this week, Testloop, we should clarify right up front, it's Testloop, and they're not related directly to Tesla. What Testloop is doing is they're a separate company, and they're taking Teslas, and I believe it's kind of like Uber, possibly eventually an automated Uber, but for right now, probably just by drivers. And basically, Testloop is offering an Uber-like service with Teslas, I guess, right? And so they're going to put the Teslas on the blockchain as well. What did you take away from this announcement?
Yes, it's like a ride-sharing service, and the founder wants to use EOS to be able to create that market between renting the rides. So I don't think there's actually going to be real Teslas on the blockchain, but at least there will be the functioning software. It will make it happen on EOS, and that's just exciting to see. Some people in Silicon Valley, I'm expecting which they're from, to look at EOS in this way to help fulfill their solutions.
And I think automatic ride sharing for cars that self-drive, it'll be an interesting, we're talking probably 10 years in the future, possibly. But I've heard before, and this is kind of unrelated to blockchain, but I've heard that possibly in the future we'll be riding in cars, we're just paying a monthly lease fee to some company, right? And then we basically hail a car whenever we need it, and it will just show up in our driveway, and then we hop in and drive around. Our cars, 90% of the time, our cars go unused and sit in the driveway, right? And it's just a waste of resources, waste of money. And so it'd be far more efficient to have these cars constantly running. It'd be a network owned by a company. It'd be cheaper for us as well, so on and so forth. I think a lot of us enjoy driving our own cars, so the self-driving thing is not totally welcome, but you could probably get more stuff done if you really felt like being on Telegram while riding in your Tesla on the Testloop network. So I guess we'll see how that all works out. Let's go on to Dawn 3.0, right? The big news of the week. Yep. It was just unbelievable, the whole announcement, the rebrand. So let's start with the rebrand, okay? We talked last week about the website. Remember? Yep. You brought it up. And you said, it started off dark with Dawn 1.0, it went a little bit lighter, Dawn 2.0. Dawn 3.0, they rebranded the whole thing, right? So it's EOSIO. It looks like Apple now. They have this beautiful white website. It's very professional. It's beautiful. It's meant to attract businesses, I believe. They've more and more so, they've talked about attracting companies that are already in technology, Silicon Valley and those other big areas, and try to bring them into blockchain and allow those companies to innovate and then build killer applications that will bring the customers, right? Yeah. Because it really does. It starts from the top and works its way down. So for starting with the rebrand there, Blue Jays, what were your thoughts?
Well, I knew they were going to lighten it up, but that was just crazy. It's just they totally did a rebrand, like you said, and it looks great. It looks amazing. I would have liked to see one color in there, but then again, I'm not a designer, so.
Yeah, you're also not a Silicon Valley company that is trying to learn about EOS and goes, "Oh, this is a nice looking professional website. I think I'll work with these guys." So we wanted a nice bright sunshine. Sun. We're talking about the sun in the corner, and he's got his big smile on, looking down on the children playing. Turns out, I guess that's not the way they want it to go.
Businesses don't like, working at the beach.
I mean, I guess I'm clearly not a business, right? Because I want to be at the beach. So, and let's go on to the technicals here. So, of course, Dan released the article. He surprised everybody by putting out Dawn 3.0 a day early, which I suppose technically was actually the day of in Hong Kong. He put it out the 5th of April for us in the United States, but it was actually probably the early morning of the 6th of April. And he released a long Medium post describing all of the amazing features. Blue Jays, can you take us through some of them that you saw?
So what stood out to me, and I think it stood out to many people, especially if you guys haven't caught the segment earlier on with Erik Hoel, was the inter-blockchain communication feature, which is it's basically meant to expand the resources of the network to scale to any type of resource needs that we're going to require from a DApp. And to do that while not breaking the ecosystem, while not breaking the tokens that are available across all of those different expansionary areas. So that requires basically a token to go from one network to another chain, and that's that inter-blockchain communication. And the team has made that happen by including headers on each transaction, so that they mean something and they can be unique across different chains, but also be auditable as well. So that is something big in the space, and I think it's amazing. It's almost as if somebody, and I asked this to Erik Hoel, is they definitely knew that this feature was invented for the need. So necessity is a mother of invention, and that's exactly what happened here. So
yeah, definitely. And he called it the Holy Grail in his post.
Dan did,
the Holy Grail of scalability.
Yeah.
And if it does work out, and he also recommended in the post that block producer candidates should advertise how many concurrent chains they can run, right? So you have a lot of horsepower behind one chain, but also how many other chains can you spin up and communicate with? And that's going to be a key feature. A lot of the post, there were so many different parts to it, but a lot of it was just about the performance that EOS will provide, or the EOSIO software will provide. And also we talked a little bit about the BIOS architecture, which, as you referred to, only one token is needed to control all of those other chains that the block producers are offering. And therefore you have one token for the governance. Erik Hoel talked about it a little bit as well. And he also Dan brought up the security delayed transactions. And so basically if someone is trying to steal your tokens from you, you can freeze your account so the tokens are not actually taken from you. Furthermore, I believe if you lose access to your account, you can have it frozen, and then there's a 30-day delay to where you get access back to your account as well.
Interesting.
So basically, he's talking about how time is one of the most important security features when it comes to losing funds or trying to gain them back, because a hacker will want to take the funds and then automatically transfer them somewhere else to exchange and so on and so forth.
So Kevin, all of these news comes up. It goes back to what Thomas says about this being the rule of law chain. So all of these tools make that happen. I think we get used to the old Wild West of cryptocurrency, where you send something to the wrong address, you lose your private key, and it's the Wild West. And now we have something that's, the new rebrand. It's just clear as day. It's brand new. It's the rule of law, and that's going to clear up a lot of things and make it easier for grandma to come onto the chain, and your mom and dad and everybody, because they know it's protected and audit and transparent.
Sure. Yeah. And not only that, but you have these large companies that will get involved with the EOSIO software, and those companies they already know about how to work with users and how to encourage users to get on there. And so they'll purposely build their dApps to be as user-friendly as possible, which will bring grandma in there, and she won't have to worry about her time-locked tokens maybe. We don't know yet how that will all look. I mean, perhaps there will be some level of centralization still, I'm sure, where the dApp will want to help users with that kind of stuff. There'll be a customer support area probably. And whenever you have something with money, there's got to be some customer support.
Yep.
Someone for you to call and say, hey, I just lost my money. What the heck is going on, right?
Yeah.
So I still suspect there will be banks. This is all just speculation at this point, but I'm thinking there will probably be some little banking service that will help with that kind of stuff. You know, here's quick access back to your tokens while we help you unlock the ones that got stolen from 30, you know, that so on and so forth. Going back to Dan's post, so he talked about the inter-blockchain communication, which he has confirmed will be available at launch in June. It is not currently available, I believe, on Dawn 3.0. Also, the block.one testnet is going to be started back up again on May 4th.
Yep.
The same day as the new Star Wars movie.
Yep.
And Dan, always the lover of puns, said, "May the source be with you" in Telegram chat.
I love that one.
Collective groan can be heard around the world. No, I think everybody appreciates Dan as a regular dude. He could be a robot, just he's really studied the human race and the human humor very thoroughly, and knows how to do these puns. We don't know. Yeah, so
I'd like to think that he's just waiting back and to use them. You know.
You think he writes them down every time he thinks of one?
Yeah.
oh, let me write them. The source. Or do you think he just goes right to Telegram and right away just spits it out there whenever he can?
He is Dan. It could just pop up to him like that, yeah.
Probably so, yeah. So yeah, Dawn 3.0, a huge deal. We've all been waiting for it. There's more to come, really, because they're still squashing out bugs.
A couple things that Dan mentioned on that post and in the Telegram too. So a couple quotes that we took was, one token on many chains means no EOS X coins. They will all transfer across. Use EOS to stake on side chains. Also, side chains would be a permission network and would not have a 51% attack vector. Yeah, so they're also thinking about attack vectors on these side chains as well too. So
that's true. Thank you for bringing up the security part of the post that he made. Yes, they're working hard to make it the most secure blockchain of any. So yeah, as you said, 2/3 as opposed to 51%. Of course, the governance also helps with that, just in terms of avoiding those problems before they become 2/3 or more.
Yeah.
So it's a lot going into this.
The other thing that stood out to me on the post, among all of the other amazing things, was the simplified smart contract development. So they mentioned that they have quite a lot of support for C++ standard template library. This basically means developers can use the tools, libraries, and algorithms they're familiar with, while eliminating the potential for bugs caused by non-standard implementation of these algorithms. So I mean, C++ is, in the industry, it used to be the de facto language. Java took that over, I think, in the 2000s, or maybe a little later than that. But C++ used to be the language back in the day, and everything that needed strong software engineering was built on C++. And there have been some weaknesses for it, but they've been mostly, largely in part, been remediated over the time, especially as we're into 2018. So C++ is just going to be a beast of a language to code on, especially that they have so much support for it. So EOS looks like it's going to have a lot of developer support.
Yeah, and actually we've seen Brendan Bloomer in the Telegram. He's been talking about how they have been working hard to hire developer relations groups and also developer support and documentation groups. They're trying to make sure that everything is as easy to learn as possible. So that is still to come, more documentation on how how to write great smart contracts and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see.
And if anyone wants to go, hasn't seen the Medium post, check it out. It was just amazing. So we won't cover everything here. We have to move on, but
yeah. Let's go on to the community hackathon. Oh, actually, we should mention the block.one hackathon, right? They had a few announcements during their So they had Dawn 3.0, and then they also had their Hong Kong party, I guess you could call it, /event/meetup. And they
Another
had a bunch
VC?
of announcements there. Another VC, an Asian-specific one where it's $200 million.
Yeah.
$200 million for development on EOSIO software.
Amazing.
That's incredible. They also had an announcement about their hackathon. So they're holding 4 different events throughout the rest of the year, starting after June. And there are 4 different cities. It's $1.5 million total prize pool. $500,000 goes directly to the winner. And so they brought in 5 of the top GitHub contributors, community contributors, to fly into Hong Kong to be a part of the hackathon. And I believe Sheldon was in there as well.
Oh, wow.
Sheldon, we always give a shout out to him. He's been on the show saying hello with his EOS Shenzhen meetup. So, and I think he was also there at the Hong Kong event. I believe I've talked to him a little bit, and he said it was enormous. We saw pictures on Telegram from people who were there, and it looks like it was very professional, and it was in a massive building in Hong Kong.
I could just picture Sheldon being right in the middle of the dance floor right now.
Oh man, I don't know if that's his style, but I think he's more, he prefers a steady routine, hardworking, things like that, and he's an extremely hardworking guy. So anyway, moving forward here, let's look to Soros prepares to invest in cryptocurrency, and he claims the bubble was in January, and now the $26 billion man is preparing to allow the Soros fund to trade in cryptocurrency. What were your thoughts on this particular announcement from Bloomberg?
To trade. I'm not 100% sure. It's good that other monies are coming in. However, I don't know what the purpose of it is. Is it like investing in projects, or is it going to be to trade and make market making type of volume? And I'm not 100% sure about this. I think it's positive news, definitely.
Yeah, anytime people hear about big money possibly coming into blockchain, it becomes big news very quickly.
Yeah.
As we know, crypto markets are unregulated, and so there's a lot of strange things that can go on. I personally don't try to keep up with them too much because the EOS Price channel does it for me, and I like to jump in there and just watch their memes as the price goes either up or down. So, and to me, that's where it's going. It's either up or down, and big deal. So. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of manipulation with the markets lately. There will be some whale that will just buy up a whole bunch all at once. You'll see the price rocket up $400 for Bitcoin all at once. And then everybody starts buying in, right? Because they think the price is going up. And then that same person possibly will sell a whole bunch all at once. Or they'll close a whole bunch of shorts, whatever the case is, right? So
I wonder if people lock up their tokens for leasing, it would reduce that volatility.
It's a good point. I suppose there'll be fewer tokens on the market.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that could actually reduce liquidity. So if there is a big whale, he could push the market around a little easier. But I mean, who knows? Hopefully, I'm hoping, I don't know. Regulation, right? It's either a good thing or a bad thing. There are some aspects where we have a lot of smaller investors who are losing money because they are chasing these ups and downs. That's market manipulation at its finest. And that is why it is illegal in a lot of jurisdictions. So, long story short is don't have a good answer for you. I mean, we'll see about the token leasing with Chintai. Hopefully there is less of that going on by the time we have everything available.
And there was, so moving on, Kev, there was also a community hackathon announced and teased out there. I think more details are coming. But we did see the emergence of a community-run hackathon.
Yeah, and I think the idea around that is, so the block.one hackathon is great. It's huge, right? And it's in locations throughout the world, but it's not a global online hackathon. And so the community felt it was time for a global one where everybody could participate from anywhere, right? They could sit at home and where they're most comfortable, where they have everything they need, and they can go ahead and make their best possible effort. Or they can gather with their friends and do that there, or gather online with their friends. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be pretty exciting to watch this unfold. I know it's in the process. We're about to find out more, I believe, in the next few days or weeks. So yeah, definitely everybody keep your ears and eyes open for that. Let's go into, so we're going back into cryptocurrency in general. Centracoin and Floyd Mayweather, those founders that made the Centracoin, were arrested because of a fraudulent ICO. I don't know a whole lot about Centracoin. I know they were claiming that they could offer debit cards for cryptocurrency, and they claimed they had all these different Visa partnerships and MasterCard, and you know how this all went with the ICOs. There was a lot of different scams out there, unfortunately. Naturally, this particular one did not deliver on their promises. It turned out they had fake team members, and they also did not actually have, just pull a picture and put some random name up there, I guess, and then
and
make
Floyd
up.
Mayweather was associated with it.
Yeah, I think they either paid Floyd directly and got him to post it on Instagram. And so that was back in, I think, August or somewhere around there. He shilled Centracoin for them on his Instagram page. And now those founders are going to jail. So moving on to the Hong Kong meetup, we already talked about that. The block.one recap, they made a Medium article, block.one did. And you can go and check all the different announcements and read more about the event itself if you'd like to go do that. Last piece of news is Novogratz. This is brand new, breaking news. We just heard about it before coming on the show. Another Goldman Sachs executive dumps Wall Street for the crypto world is the title on this CNBC article. Early crypto investor Mike Novogratz hired Richard Kim from Goldman Sachs as the new COO of his crypto merchant bank, Galaxy Digital, which we are all familiar with because Galaxy Digital has thrown in $325 million towards EOS-developed projects. This is pretty interesting. What are your thoughts there, Blue Jays?
I mean, this is normal. People move around, and it could be significant, but it could also be just normal moving around too within the industry. I think it's positive. Definitely, we have somebody who were in the higher ranks of Goldman Sachs that has moved over to the crypto world, and I think that's great. He probably sees a great potential and a good career move. It's a good career move for him. Sure.
Yeah, and as we've talked about before, any kind of Wall Street news that moves into cryptocurrency becomes a big deal. In the cryptocurrency world, that is. The Wall Street world probably doesn't care.
Yeah.
I think that EOS is supposed to be, or we believe it will be, the next version of the internet, basically, right? So I think news like this will come more frequently. And you heard David Packham talk earlier from Chintai. He mentioned how he believes the community could be quadruple in size by the end of the year, right?
Absolutely.
So our little group, we will not be quite so close. I guess after a while, we'll still remember the good old days, but there'll be a lot of unknown names coming in as well, which will be fun. It'll be fun. I can't wait.
Right.
But, yeah, I'm excited. Well, I'm always excited. So.
We'll be saying, hey, you remember when the EOS website was dark and had all this stuff shining behind the chestahedron, right?
People will say, "What chestahedron? What is that?"
Yeah,
because that new trademarked logo they have on the EOSIO. Yeah. And so let's go to meetups, of course. So Bangkok has a meetup coming up. Let's check and see when that date is. And you heard Thomas Cox. So he's going to a bunch of meetups. He has sort of a run coming up here in the next couple weeks, all around the country. So EOS Bangkok is actually happening, or it might have already happened. That was today, April 9th, 6:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. in Bangkok, which means it already went on. It's now April 10th for them, I believe. So what else do you have there, Blue Jays, for your meetups?
I think that's it, other than the ones that Thomas mentioned that are upcoming.
Yeah. EOS Nottingham, I should say. They have one coming up. They have not firmed up a date specifically, but they are working on one. And they're actually looking to bring over more folks from Bitcoin and Ethereum and Ripple. They have kind of a meetup that's spreading out beyond just EOS to try and bring those folks in.
Excellent.
To try and bring more talent into EOS. So it's great that we're seeing a lot of community members bring in folks from outside EOS world. You mentioned before how we don't want to be an echo chamber. We want that constructive criticism, and we want some debate, and we also want outside thoughts. For example, EOS New York bringing in that great economist, Forbes 30 under 30 economist is advising their team. So we can only benefit from that, I would say.
Absolutely.
I should also mention that actually the EOS Charlotte meetup in North Carolina, Thomas Cox will be on video for that one. I'm going to go down there. I live in Durham, North Carolina, and they've asked me to give a little talk, which is flattering. So I'm going to do my best. I have a little presentation I'll put together, and I'll meet everybody there. Should be very exciting.
Where are you going?
Charlotte, North Carolina. They have a meetup April 27th. It's a Friday, and it's 6:30 to 8:30, April 27th. So if you guys want to hang out, I'd love to meet everybody, and looking forward to that. And we'll wave hi to Thomas on the video chat as he gives the main presentation of the night. So let's go ahead and wrap this up, Blue Jays. What are your final thoughts?
I was just super happy with release candidate 1. I just like Erik Hoel said, there's just so much in there. There's just so much meat in what was delivered, and they're just block.one and the team are just thinking, and the community are just thinking of all the ways of making this thing successful. And I'm just proud to be part of it.
Yeah, great way to put it. Proud to be part of it. I am as well, of course. And I'm looking forward as well. I believe governance will become the next big issue or big topic, I should say, for block.one and for Dan and for, of course, Thomas. I expect or hope that we'll see more about that coming out very soon. Now that they've put out release candidate 1, they can sort of shift their focus. I'm sure they've taken a nice deep breather at this point. And, one of my favorite quotes from the Telegram was on Friday during the Hong Kong meetup announcement. Dan was in there cracking jokes, and it was about 6:30 in the morning Dan time, Okay. So anyway, Sandwich was on stage, and he was giving out the information from the post, from the Medium post that Dan put out. And Dan said, he may sound cheesy, but there's a lot of meat in there. Making fun, talking about Sandwich, you're giving a little joke about Sandwich. So, Dan is in a good mood. That's what I'm taking from all this.
Yeah, exactly. I've delivered my code. I can now,
I was like, woo!
Kick back
Let
with
me go
a
on
do.
A do in the Telegram, EOS General Chat. And also, not to mention EOS Price. He's been hanging out in there a lot.
Wow.
And that Dan-only message bot does not pick up his messages in EOS Price. So he goes wild in there.
I'd like to see Dan comment and say "when moon." That just blow everyone's mind.
He answered it the other day.
Oh, did?
Someone said, at Daniel Larimer, when moon? And he said, according to Google, the next big moon is going to be April 23rd or sometime. It's going to rise tomorrow at 3:20 a.m. or something. Typical Dan. So
imagine actually being a when moon type person and getting that answer.
And just going, maybe let me ask about Lambos instead.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens this coming week. Let's look forward to more governance. I'm sure Thomas will be busier and busier. He'll have more and more questions to answer. If you have any questions for him, please look on the forums. We always make a weekly post. It's already up, and you can put your questions there. You can look back at what other questions have already been asked, or go back and watch the old videos from him, so we know we're not asking the same questions of Thomas. What else should folks look into there, Blue Jays?
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube.
Yep. And of course, the community updates on Telegram, we just offer an announcement channel only, so you can sort of filter out the important updates. We put everything up there as well. Thank you guys for joining us on episode 7.
Thanks, everybody. It was a great show, and thanks for joining us.
And go EOS.
Go EOS.